Really? No, yeah, I think I have one more on there. I was nervous.
You guys want me to introduce your titles? I mean, we're still.
Sure, if you want. It doesn't matter.
The mic has to come from that and whatever else.
Did you have it? You don't have that.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We're so excited to be able to present to you today. We've worked hard on this project over the last year. So I'm Nate Prescott. I'm the Economic Development Analyst here for the city. I'm presenting on behalf of Kathy Lewis, our Economic Development Manager, and myself. Kathy is out sick today. She wouldn't be here, or she would be here unless she wasn't physically able, and that's the case. So we're excited to present to you. Our current economic development strategic plan was created in 2014, and it's guided a lot that we've done over the last few years, and it needed to be updated. So that's why we've contracted to create a new economic development strategic plan that will guide us over the next 5 to 7 years. And through an RFP process, we interviewed multiple firms, and we've contracted with Thomas P. Miller and Associates to create our economic development strategic plan. Over the last year, we've held 6 different stakeholder workshops to try to get engagement and feedback from the community to try to guide and inform our economic development strategic plan. And so these strategies come directly from those work sessions. This plan will serve as a guide to support and strengthen local businesses and to create a thriving business environment here in Orem. So I'd like to introduce our consultants from Thomas P. Miller and Associates. We have Brett Weiler, he's the Director of Economic Development, and Aaron Findley, he's the Senior Consultant. I'll turn the time over to Brett and Aaron.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. And as Nate mentioned, my name is Brett Weiler. I'm the Director of Economic Development with Thomas P. Miller and Associates, and we'll give you a little bit more context about our firm here in a moment. This is my 4th trip to Orem. My first set foot in Orem, I think July of last year, and I've enjoyed my visits. I've really relished the opportunity to connect with not only the staff members here at the City of Orem, but also to get to know some folks here in this room and some other community leaders that have participated in this process. So our goal here today is to give you an overview of where we've been, our process, our methodology, touch briefly on some of our key themes or key findings, and then really get into, well, not the most important part, but we want to outline our strategic recommendations for you, and then get to the most important part of the presentation, and that's fielding questions from all of you folks. So with that, I mentioned we are with Thomas P. Miller and Associates. We're based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. We've been in business for about 30 years. We are a professional consulting firm that specializes in workforce development, economic development, evaluation. We do some work in education and broadband, et cetera. We're a fully remote team. We have employees across, I think, 15 different states. That gives us, I think, really unique perspective about programs and processes and tools and strategies that work across the country in different communities, and we try to apply that when appropriate to communities like yours. What we're going to do today, I mentioned a little bit, we've given you some introductions. Again, some of our key findings. I want to frame up what we believe the purpose of an economic development strategy is and could be for you folks, and then get into those recommendations and field some questions. So an economic development strategic plan, I have a quote on here that I think really summarizes the essence of what we've tried to create here with this plan. And that's really just bringing people together across the community to outline a vision for the economic future of Orem. It's an appraisal of what we deem resources, programs, perhaps constraints for the business community, and more importantly, maybe the opportunities for businesses in Orem. We wanted to outline a roadmap for the Economic Development Division to enhance their performance so they could better support the businesses in Orem, and outline steps that we believe that division and city leaders and key stakeholders can take to develop that economic vision for the future here. I think it's important to note that this is not a policy memorandum. This is not any type of legislative recommendation. There is no recommendations on how to allocate budget, spending, line items. This is really a plan developed to ensure that the Economic Development Division has the tools and the visions to best serve the business community here in Orem. And we'll get into a little bit about more of like what that means here in a moment. So with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Aaron, to kind of talk through some of our process to get to this point.
Thank you, Brett. Just really quickly, everyone, my name is Aaron Finley, Senior Consultant at TPMA, as was mentioned. My role in this project, well, it's been multifaceted, to be quite honest with you, but part of it has been to work on some of the quantitative data and a lot of the research involving Orem. What you see behind me on the screen is kind of our scope of service for this almost year-long process that we've been engaged in to develop this economic development strategic plan that we're going to be covering some of those recommendations with you today. We started with that project launch. Basically what you'll see in front of you, we follow a logical model that starts and commences with a discovery phase, in which we're going to cover a little bit more detail here on the next slide. That moves into an analysis, the SWOT analysis, identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the community. Then we did quite a number, as Nate mentioned earlier, and we'll talk a little bit here on the next slide as well, of focus groups, meeting with business, local leaders in the community, a variety of stakeholders to make sure that what we are finding out, either through some of our interviews and meetings and also through some of our desktop research and secondary sources, actually matches what we are finding here and is happening on the ground in the community. And then that culminates, of course, with our final plan and presentation, which here we are doing that exactly right now. So I did want to talk a little bit about that discovery phase, give you a little bit of an overview of where we've been and how we came to the recommendations that we're going to discover here. We do, as I mentioned, start out with quantitative data collection analysis. We have a variety of sources for our data. We've got information, in fact, from some local sources. We've talked to the Utah State Tax Commission and got some information from them. We also, of course, use information from the U.S. Census Bureau, the American Community Survey, and a variety of third-party sources that some of which offer statistical analysis to produce some projections, a variety of statistical methods that we use there as well. We also have reviewed over 24 documents, including city budgets, master plans, variety of studies, agreements, many of which, of course, are specific to Orem. Reviewed those as part of our discovery phase, and then we, as I mentioned earlier, did a lot of stakeholder engagement. So we've actually had a half dozen focus groups, site visits. Brett mentioned he's been here 4 times. I'm lucky enough to be here today. This is my first trip to Orem, so thank you for having me. Including in those site visits, we've, as I mentioned, members of local business community, other regional and local stakeholders, several elected and appointed officials as well. We've had multiple sessions seeking feedback on the strategies we're going to go over with you today, on those findings and those recommendations as well. And in total, we've interacted with, I think we counted over 75 individuals connected to Orem who are committed to helping shape these recommendations and, of course, the future of economic development and the business community in this city. So, I skipped my one big shining moment here. So these are our high-level findings from all of that document and research review that we just went over. Some really top-line information. Orem has a rapidly growing population. I don't think that's going to be a surprise to anybody in the room. We also found, of course, that Orem residents are healthy. They're well-educated. But one of the things that was interesting, and I mentioned this during our session with the Planning Commission, Orem has 2 populations. There's the resident population and there's the working population. About 80% of Orem residents commute outside of the city for their jobs. And about 80% of the people who work in the city live outside of Orem. So there are 2 populations here. It's important to keep those separate just when we think about the data and look at these different things. Top occupations, when we do look at the workers here, service related, typically relatively moderate, low income, a lot of people work in Orem. Those top industries are post-secondary education, a lot of retail and business services, for instance, marketing and IT. Those are the top industries when we look across the top 10 are all in those 3 or 4 areas. We do know when we look also that we have limited land. We're pretty built out here in Orem. Again, not a surprise, I'm sure, to many of you. Limited land available for residential developments. The median sale price for homes is growing. In fact, it's recently reached over $500,000. It's already surpassing what were projections for a few years down the line. Just some top line data as part of our job here is to give an update on some of that information about the city. That's a quick overview here, and we'll be happy to field questions a little bit later, but I will hand it back to Brett to talk about the strategic framework for our recommendations.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And maybe just a couple quick takeaways from me here is, we believe that we've performed a pretty comprehensive discovery phase through this process. Not only the traditional desktop research, but we've tried to come out here and talk to people face to face and to get feedback from folks that are living here as often as possible. And so that comprehensive discovery phase has informed our strategic recommendations. And we, so the premier trade association for economic development practitioners is the International Economic Development Council. And they outline really these kind of 4 foundations of economic development for entities who are performing economic development. And you see those 4 foundations on the screen here. And that's how we organized our strategic framework around these, I guess, 4 functions, if you will. And you'll see it's about retaining businesses, it's about attracting businesses, it's about launching new businesses, and then it's also being mindful of the quality of life in the community to support the folks that are working in these businesses. So I want to go into each of these very briefly because, again, I think the most important purpose today is to answer questions that you may have. But our first and arguably what I believe is the most important aspect of economic development is keeping the businesses that you have here. They've already planted that proverbial flag in your community. They are most likely to continue to create jobs. And so we believe that the strategic priority of the Economic Development Division should be business retention and expansion outreach. We believe that the Orem Business Alliance is a really great vehicle to do that. We believe they're doing great work now. We believe that it can be more intentional, more strategic, and is the most cost-effective way to do economic development in City Hall. The other note I would point out is that we believe there's an opportunity to better track aggregate information. So intentionally meeting with businesses and asking them what opportunities they may have or what challenges they're facing. We believe that information should be kept in a CRM system, and that aggregate information should inform the team of trends that will then hopefully inform programmatic offerings or outreach strategies. We believe that there's an opportunity to be more informed about the trends of the businesses here in the community. Third thing I would point out too is we believe that there's a role for the division to play in supporting local businesses. We think that could be done with perhaps reviewing current city procurement policy to ensure that we're taking full advantages of procuring goods and services from our local businesses. We also believe there are opportunities to educate the business community, maybe our larger employers, about opportunities that they may have to purchase goods and services from local vendors when appropriate. Next, I want to talk about business attraction. So business attraction is always kind of the top line, maybe the most exciting aspect of economic development. I would argue that this requires intentionality, and it involves and requires a very it requires a process. And we believe that one of the first steps the division should do, should they look to attract business to the community, is to understand what businesses make the most sense for Orem. So we recommend that they conduct a target industry analysis so that they can, again, intentionally go and try to attract businesses that support and complement the existing business base, but also maybe meet the needs of consumers here in the region as well. After the target industry analysis, if appropriate, we believe the division could activate an integrated business attraction marketing campaign. I think the key word there would be integrated. It involves traditional media, social media, perhaps trade shows, etc. But that, we believe, comes after doing some of the earlier steps outlined in this particular focus area. Also, one important note, in our experience, regional and maybe more so state economic development leaders are critical to the business attraction function. And so we would encourage local leaders to be more consistent and more structured and meet with state agencies and state leadership on a more regular basis and work as a team to conduct any business attraction activity. Third, entrepreneurship and innovation. I want to focus on just increasing access to capital across all stages of the business life cycle. We believe that there is a sophisticated capital ecosystem here in Orem and in the region. We encourage the team to assess the current ecosystem to ensure that there is capital access from business ideation all the way through business succession and everywhere in between. That requires working with commercial banks, private lenders, public entities that offer financial products as well. We also believe that that business outreach is a great opportunity to better understand the capital needs of the businesses here in Orem. We also just want to talk briefly too on the entrepreneurship side. We believe that there are programmatic offering opportunities, offering more programming and education and seminars and networking events around innovative and tech-enabled industries and businesses. Take advantage of existing entities in the region. One in particular, the UVU Entrepreneurship Institute, is a great partner and should continue to be a great partner for you moving forward. And then lastly, quality of life. What we really want to focus on here, I would say, is placemaking. We believe that there are opportunities to think perhaps differently about how to develop or reallocate potential funding sources to provide facade improvement plans to local businesses on some of your major transportation corridors. We also believe there are opportunities to perhaps make some of those corridors more accessible for pedestrians. And then we love some of the work that we've seen around the promotion of public interactive art to create deeper connections between community residents and their community. So we tried to keep it brief. This is not a comprehensive overview of the strategies that we've outlined. We tried to provide you what we thought were the highlights from each focus area, and we are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
You come up with several ideas. I'm wondering who does these things. You know, you're talking to a strategic board of directors setting. Is this Nathan and Kathy? Is this the local chamber of commerce? Who does all these wonderful things? How do we get funding? I mean, I don't disagree with anything you've said. I just don't know, when all said and done, who will be doing what we're talking about.
Yeah, in the plan, we've tried to identify a champion for each strategy. In some instances, we believe it is Nate and Kathy. We would never promote duplication of services or efforts. And so we would, I guess, generally encourage Kathy and Nate to continue to coordinate with appropriate regional agencies, chambers of commerce, when appropriate. So if somebody is already doing something that we've outlined as a strategy, we would suggest they support that ongoing initiative and look for opportunities to put it.
And Nathan and Kathy, as you hear about those, I assume you pull the mayor in on, you know, because people want to visit with the mayor if they're coming into the city mayor. My guess is you've had some of those type of meetings in the future. You also talked about funding sources, and I'm happy to get money off of that magic tree out there. And Nathan, do you know where those sources are that you apply for grants, et cetera?
Yes, there are grants that come out and that we try to push out to businesses, but there are other organizations. So one, we have our revolving loan fund program. We still have money through that. And there are county and state programs that come up periodically. And there are also programs like groups of investors get together for new entrepreneurs that they want to fund them. And so a lot of these programs exist. It's a matter of getting in touch with them, making connections, and putting them in touch with the right businesses or the right channels, and really connecting the dots.
Okay. If I may too, Nate, one of the other resources, the Federal Economic Development Administration, they've been very helpful in the past as it relates to helping us achieve kind of more local type efforts. The Business Resource Center at UVU, for example, is one of those where, while the center itself is under the umbrella of UVU, it was actually the city of Orem that made application to got the federal money, because that kind of effort had to go through a city. So we worked through the EDA in cooperation with UVU, and then got BRC up and running. The city contributed to it. And now we're even having conversations about, okay, how can we leverage this to make it better or make it different to kind of scale and meet the different needs of today as compared to when we did this 8 or 9 years ago. So that's also a good resource.
That's a great example of what we're talking about.
The other thing, if I may, there are certain things that, for example, our relationship with Utah Valley Chamber is a very positive relationship. And several years ago, they decidedly took a more policy-driven approach to their efforts, similar to what the Salt Lake County Chamber has done in past years. And they kind of de-emphasized this idea of networking and small businesses coming together and engaging with each other. And so we decided that that was not something we could go without. And so we actually created the Orem Business Alliance. So when we talk about we call it the OBA, when we talk about the OBA, that's a homegrown organization that we created, Nate and Kathy created, to connect with our local businesses and to provide them that venue or that opportunity to connect on a monthly basis for training, for networking, for better understanding what, for example, resources are available through the Small Business Administration, through other grants and other state programs and federal programs.
And to add to that, one success from the Orem Business Alliance is that I really believe we built a strong channel of delivering important information to businesses. For example, during COVID, we started sending out information and about grants, programs, all these things to help businesses, and like our usage rate of businesses in Orem using those grants was a lot higher than all the smaller size cities.
The PPP program,
yep.
we had a disproportionate number of PPP payers,
right,
or recipients in Orem than we did the rest of the county. I attribute that in part to the efforts of Nate and Kathy and their Orem Business Alliance effort.
Right. And so we built the channels to deliver that information and facilitate those relationships.
If I may, there's a saying that business owners are too busy running their business to understand all of the services and resources available to them in the economic development ecosystem. And that's why we believe probably the number one priority of Nate and Kathy and their team is to get out there, build that trust, build that rapport, and ensure that those business owners are taking full advantages of the resources that are available to them.
So are there specific businesses? The reason I say that, in the past, we pull a sales tax leakage report, or we've always been positioned, I shouldn't say always, in hotels and service stations, gas stations, but we far superior in other areas. Yes. So do you have specific recommendations like that we should try to go off, or are they more general?
So we did pull a sales leakage report for you. There's a somewhat lengthy explanation in the back and an appendix in the report that talks about the sales leakage report. When you do look at particular areas of retail, I'm happy to report that lodging didn't appear in the negative as it had previously. But some of the others, remain. There's very few, as you know, areas of the retail sector that Orem is leaking those sales numbers to. But as far as kind of specifics about industries or anything like that, we were really kind of focused more on general approaches to retention, attraction, expansion, things of that nature. And one of the reasons that we did recommend that targeted industry analysis is to do a little bit more of that deep dive into some of those things to find out a little bit more information. However, there are full updated numbers on sales leakage reports provided in the report.
Targeted industries, or is that a recommendation that they?
Part of our recommendation is that there is a target industry analysis conducted, I think an RFP put out, and have the opportunity to do a little bit more of that deep dive. Again, we did provide some data in that space, but our scope was just maybe a little bit kind of broader, I guess, and strategic than focusing on some of those specific industries. Although, again, a lot of that data is there for you to take a look at.
And I do like the recommendation. When I was an economic development director in American Fork, I would ask businesses, what keeps you up at night?
Yes.
And what are your pain points? And it was interesting as you talk to people, very similar.
Yes.
Very similar. So, and I think once you find the similarities, then you can work on those points and help. And I know one thing that we found out that downtown businesses in American Fork wanted sandwich board signs on the blocks. I mean, I wouldn't know that was something that they were concerned about. And so we are able to work. And just a small example, when enough people have that pain point, you can try to work on a solution. So I do think it's good that they get out and talk to people, because businesses will tell you what keeps them up. And probably right now it's not lacking employees and not having qualified workforce. And I don't know how much people do on that, but I think that's a good question to always ask, because an owner will tell you that information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you notice a strong relationship between UVU and Forum, your department, as far as internship opportunities? Is that something that you're?
That's something that we're exploring. Yeah, so that's something that Kathy and I have brainstormed of, like, how do we put, because we believe that there's a lot of great minds that are graduating. And then how do we keep them here in Orem? How do we get them starting their business here in Orem? And so that's something that we're brainstorming of, like, how do we make that connection? Whether it's, one idea that we've had is holding kind of like a job fair, but where students come in, because we have this venue where once a month we have businesses come in, we have a great turnout. So we've got this organic already going, and we thought of turning one of these into having students come in. They're like, hey, they have a presentation or like a little board that's like, this is what I'm interested in. These are the types of projects I can do, and I'd love to do an internship or start a job. And so it's kind of like a reverse job fair. But so there's lots of opportunities. There's all kinds of things that we're doing, and that is a concern, and that one that we're looking to address.
Is that what you guys concur with what they're doing? Suggestions, ways to keep our, graduates here?
We believe that, again, I hate to overuse the word, but just, again, maybe being more intentional. We believe that the intellectual capacity at UVU can help the business community, right? Through capstone projects, internships, right? And then I think in turn, the business community can also support those students by opening those doors, offering those opportunities. So in our plan, again, we've just offered maybe a more structured approach to making those connections and bringing those two realms together, if you will.
Say, as far as interns go, I think, talking to this and that sort of thing, it seems like there is a disconnect between companies that think, oh, I think I need an intern, and then you've got the intern departments over here. And those really need to be brought together, I think, because there's resources missing. And then as far as the presentation, I agree with everything you said in the presentation. I think that's great. My question is, okay, so we've got this presentation, it's got this framework, and then we've got two people in our economic development department. So they got this big presentation. How do we get from here to there? It seems like it has to be broken down in terms of priorities and focus and whatever they got to work with as far as budget and all the rest. But anyway, it just seems to my concern about this is that, yeah, it's great, but a year from now, how much of that are we going to be executed on? versus just that was a good idea. So that's where I'm curious to see, okay, how do you make that happen specifically? And then how are you held accountable to making that happen? Because that's a big project. Yeah.
So I appreciate the question, Mayor. It's a fair question. Two comments, and then Aaron or Nate. I will say that in our discovery, we recognized that Orem was very successful at implementing their 2014 Economic Development Strategic Plan. We spent some time really going line item by line item with the team. Hey, did you achieve this? Did you achieve that? And we found that they were very successful at implementing the previous plan. So I guess for what it's worth, we have confidence that will occur again. We've provided an implementation matrix in the plan that I don't know if we prioritize steps. We certainly provide a timeline of steps that we believe need to occur in a certain order, maybe some short-term wins, maybe some medium-term wins, and then maybe some more long-term aspirations. And then, as I mentioned previously, I think we've also outlined what we believe are champions and possible partners. I don't believe we are suggesting that Kathy and Nate go it alone, but to continue to connect with the local resources to attack it as an ecosystem. And then I will say, I think that there are very few recommendations in here, in my estimation, that are going to require like more capacity or more funding. We believe what we've seen is that they're doing all the right things, just some more strategic thinking, some more intentionality will continue to enhance the performance of the division as it is today.
I like one of the 4 bullet points about keeping existing businesses, large and small, and civic. That's critical. With lots of big companies. And did you study the master plan and how that impacts our new master plan? How that impacts your study? Did that come into play?
So, correct me if I'm wrong. Is there a master plan being conducted right now? Are you in the process of developing a master plan as we speak?
When I say master plan, there was a big change with State Street, which was going to be a lot of apartments. Now it's going to be retail business, and that's the direction of the city council. So just as you're talking about, what you mentioned, rapidly growing population, we're growing at about 1% a year. So I wasn't sure what you're looking at. We've gone from 90 to 99 in 10 years. But we have we've lost some big companies that were here that really hurt. And we were going to lose some small companies on State Street until that change was done that we're planning on leaving. So I think that's great. But just a question. You said you studied 75 individuals that you used in the study. Any elected officials? Because the elected officials, I mean, all 7 of us have been out knocking on doors and pounding the pavement, hearing what the citizens want. So were any of us involved in the study? Or?
Yes, we had David Spencer and Lorraine Millett came to our stakeholder workshops, and all of you were invited. I sent you all emails, and we presented on it either at the end of January or beginning of February. We presented kind of an update, midway update, and we briefed you on that as well, that was coming up. So we invited everyone. We tried to get on almost actually every single one of the planning commission came. So
is this the Miller study or our own study? Is this part of what they did?
This was part of our own study. Yep.
That was a little. I have to say that was a little. It's shifted a little since then because we since changed the state plan after that. So we do have huge needs now for commercial development on State Street because that plan of the high density housing is now no longer known for that. So to me, what you're doing with coordinating with businesses and what you presented, this is huge. I mean, I like this. I agree with Mary Young. We've got to figure out how to implement this now because we have this new zoning. We want to help these entrepreneurs, these graduates say, we may have an old building on State Street, but come and let us work with you on how to renovate that, how to revitalize that area and bring jobs that are something to decide. I mean, we love our sales tax base, we love that, but we've lost factor. We've lost these professional jobs. As you said, we've got 80% of our population being outside of work. So that's what I see, and I've seen their luncheons. They're doing a great job, but I'm really hoping that you're giving this these are very difficult things to implement with that.
Mayor, if I may, I think this study and the findings of the study can serve as a great foundation for the discussion that we need to have about State Street perspective. So we went through a process where we amended the State Street Master Plan and we made some changes to it. But I think now we need to say, okay, we were heading down one path on State Street. Now let's redefine the path. And the redefinition of the path, I think, can in large part be driven by some of these findings. If in fact, for example, we want to encourage or promote certain things as noted in the plan, then how can we do that along the State Street corridor? And what are some things that we need to do and include and essentially vision along the State Street corridor to achieve many of the things that are noted in this plan? So I see this not necessarily as independent from, for example, State Street, but serving as a means to start a dialogue about State Street and say, this is what we know and this is what we think we need and we want. Now, how can we, in the implementation phase, accomplish some of this along the State Street corridor?
Which you've got a statement here. You said, final city leadership should form strong and sustainable relationships with regional commercial real estate brokerage community. I agree with that 100% because they know the industry, they know what needs to be done, and that. Those kind of meetings too.
That really is too. I mean, anytime you do a commercial building, the success of it depends on the realtors we have promoting it. And so to the extent we have that promoting the essence of the foundation, yeah. So like I said, I like the plan. I just like to see it continue on. I like to see it now integrated with State Street. That's a huge business resource. Another part that I think you mentioned there, but I think it would be appropriate for State Street would be identifying essentially inventory in Orem, locations, spots, and then proactively going out and recruiting businesses to fill those spots that fit our target.
Yeah, that's one of our action items, is creating an inventory, ongoing inventory of open real estate and possibilities. So yeah, I totally agree, it's on there.
Yes, maybe one question for that. You could explain in more detail what exactly is a targeted industry analysis study, because I think maybe that's going to speak to a lot of feedback.
You want to take a step? I can take a step. Yeah. So, maybe speaking generally to start, you can't be all things to all people. So we believe that taking some of the current industry mix, maybe understanding what some of the strengths are, some of the supply chains, value chains in those current industries, conducting an analysis on the quantitative side, pairing that with maybe some of the qualitative research, understanding some of your educational strengths, some of your institutional strengths, perhaps the desires of the elected officials. And essentially what we would do is create some type of methodology that would then narrow down, 4, 5, 6 industries that we believe make the most sense as targets for Orem. Don't believe I explained that as well as I wanted to. We've recently finished a targeted industry analysis in Yuma, Arizona. Not a particularly all that different community in terms of some of just the demographics and the size, where we're able to identify 6 target industries that we believe make sense for them based on kind of those qualitative factors, those quantitative factors. I'm happy to share that with you as perhaps an example, but do you want to take a stab at maybe explaining that better than I did?
Yeah, sure. I think that when we talk about target industry analysis, there are a lot of things that go into that when you want to identify target industries. Obviously, some of that is where there's opportunities for growth. Obviously, we want to identify industries that are showing growth across the board. We don't want to attract, maybe a whole host of businesses or industries that are kind fading out of prominence.
Yes.
So obviously, like, we look at growth industries, we obviously look at other opportunities to see, much like we had just discussed, maybe there are some areas, maybe in the retail landscape, maybe in what we identified here. In our current top industries in Orem, while there are a lot of service and retail industries, we understand that, the retail hub of Utah County. But what we also want to understand is, well, we also saw opportunities. There are in the top 10, in addition to the post-secondary education, there's marketing, there are IT services. Now, a lot of these are services that might help further the goals and the plans of existing businesses, something like identifying IT or other business support services. Maybe that's something you want to look at. I think there's a lot of different opportunities to try to see what already are strengths and improve on them, or maybe find where there are areas for opportunities to continue to grow, to fill in some gaps that might help further support the business.
Yeah, and maybe a story, just briefly, and I hope I'm not being duplicative here, Aaron, but going back to kind of the retail concentration, we had numerous informal conversation with folks about, like, what if we focused on attracting tech-enabled companies that supported the retail industry. So somebody who's come up with a novel piece of software for inventory management, right? Or warehousing and distribution technologies, right? Because, just again, kind of our thought process, build upon those strengths that are already here and look for those emerging industries that hopefully have a certain trajectory, but again, also support and complement your existing business base.
If I could add to that, Brad, just to give everyone an example, Ogden City went through this, and they decided to target outdoor manufacturers of outdoor products. Mm-hmm. And that was who they went for. They incentivized them. They had a lot of old warehouses in Ogden, had a lot of open ground, and they've been very successful at that. Black Diamond, I think, is one of the companies that located there. A number of bicycle companies. So we need to find our niche in Orem, like Brett mentioned before. It used to just be, hey, we'll just take anybody we can get. And that was kind of the approach I was doing. But we need to figure out what our little niche in that market is, and that's who we go after. What makes Orem special? What makes it different? Once you land a few of them, they start to kind of join.
Yes.
That's a great point. As far as Ogden, Ogden had all kinds of fishing. They went after that outdoor. That's who they kind of become. Yeah. It's become a big deal.
If you're interested, maybe Ryan could speak a little bit to how did we implement the last one? Would that give an example of how we might implement this? Would be a report aspect. There'll be Jamie and I holding Kathy and the accountable. There's some of these things that we want to bring back to you and the council to consider and flesh out. Right? What would you say? What were kind of the keys to us implementing some strategies?
Well, the keys were just to make sure you had attainable goals and then you knew what you were working towards. When I took the job and Jamie came to me and said, hey, are you interested in doing this? I think you'd be good at it. I didn't know what I was doing, to be quite honest. But going through the strategic plan process, all of a sudden I had a set of goals and guidelines of how to do my job. And then I knew what I needed to do. Then Kathy, they've been following along the end of what I started, and they've been doing a great job, and they have a lot of relationships and networking. But it's been time to refocus and redirect and outline where they go. And I would just say it's kind of happened organically. You start to get momentum and you start building relationships, and all of a sudden things just start clicking. And you start checking things off as you go. And they're not the only ones that will do it. Jason Bench's team helped a lot with some of those goals with planning, and they'll be working with our team, I imagine, too, on some of these. I don't know how else to put it, but it works. You just start working hard. It's going.
Yeah. So the 6 million maintain accountability. Yeah. That accountability that will happen. Exactly. Any other questions or comments? Do you have anything else you'd like to ask?
Just that. We'd be happy if any questions or comments do come up, any follow-up items. We'd be happy to respond to those as well, should anything occur to you. As your head hits the pillow tonight, just wanted to give our contact information. And
so if I may, this discussion and this economic development plan is going through the process to be included as essentially a subunit of the city's general plan. So what we will be looking from you in the future is adopting this as kind of our strategic vision for the future for economic development. Any amendments or changes we make to the general plan, we actually have to begin at the Planning Commission level. So we've had actually already one meeting with the Planning Commission and had one conversation. The Planning Commission requested some additional time to review the document, and so we will revisit that plan with them in the next scheduled Planning Commission.
Yep, July 6th.
Our intent is to return to you on July 12th to seek your consideration for adoption as part of the city's general plan as well. So once it's essentially formally adopted and that vision is there, then that accountability is in place as to this is the direction that we're going. And then we start developing specific executables to accomplish the recommendations that TP may include.
Do you have the detailed plan right now to send us?
Yes. I thought it was included.
Oh, it might have been, okay.
Yeah.
As far as
yes, you should.
Goes, as far as the plan goes, I think the state is covered. That's going to be a big focus for the next, the next 4 years.
Well, no, I don't think states. I think what you have here is a 30,000 foot, maybe 20,000 foot altitude plan. State Street and kind of the specifics of State Street are going to require more of a 10, even 5,000 foot.
I think it's more of a subset of this.
So I would say take these guiding principles and then initiate the State Street process and talk about specifics on the State Street that are representative of the overarching plan that we've all had. And so no, I don't see this as a specific vision and plan for State Street.
Right. But this plan will be enhanced with the strategic plan for State Street. Yes.
So do you think the timeline is correct? Meaning on the 12th, that's going to be this.
I mean, it's not something that has to be adopted on the 12th. So, can we push it to another meeting? Absolutely.
The intention is to be on what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's something we have to do on the 12th, but
this is worthy of full attention in and of itself, right? So we don't want
to. July 12th is going to be.
So if you're more comfortable putting it on the agenda for the first meeting in August.
I mean, personally, I think I would we're diving, but
as a work session item, or is it?
It'd be
a city council.
To adopt what?
To consider adopting this
as what we just saw.
Yes.
Okay. I thought it was in our packet. 10,000 foot.
No. We need to actually initiate it. We haven't started on it.
So we are in the process of noticing it. So the council is instructions and not.
I mean, no, just move it.
I agree with you. August.
So that would be finally the 9th.
So the regular
one. The 9th, yes, the 9th of August. I think it'd be better.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, we appreciate the presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have presentation on progress. CPA Brandon Nelson. I thought we were
This is the last night. For a while, yeah. Yeah, that's right. So if you would all, I handed out the fraud risk assessment paper just so you could have it in front of you. The state auditor's office, Utah State Auditor's Office, for the mayor and councilmember Millett. So this is a required thing related from the Utah State Auditor's Office that finance department is required to bring forth to you, just to give you as a council an idea of what the state auditor believes. If these elements are present within our internal control structure, our finance structure, that put us across the top, you can see there, the category of risk, whether we're falling in a very low, etc., risk category. As you can see, I've gone through each of these elements and identified where in either our policies, our procedures, or our ordinances, which elements within there that we have something already in place or that we follow in relation to each one of those items. You can see also on there, item 4, 5, and 8 do not have a check mark by them. That is why you see at the very top where I have circled, we are in the middle of the low risk area, because those 3 particular elements we do not have in place. I will be honest, item number 8 is very difficult for most organizations.
So will you read that?
Okay, so item number 8 is, does the entity have a formal, which is the important component of that, formal internal audit function? So a formal internal audit function requires us to have an employee whose only responsibility is to, in essence, continually audit the functions of the city. And they report directly to city management and or to, in our case, it would be either the audit committee or you as a whole as a council. We don't feel like that is a necessary element, and you will find that in almost no city. Most cities that do claim to have some sort of a formal internal audit function, I usually hire an independent audit firm to come in and do an audit, do one of these internal audits on some sort of regular basis. We have done those in the past on occasion when maybe there was some kind of a question or something like that. So it has not been something that we've done regularly. Obviously we could. And that if that is something that we wanted to explore, then that's what my recommendation would be, obviously, rather than going and hiring an employee to do that function. So just so I give you an idea of where that particular item is. Now, item number 4, which states, are employees and elected officials required to annually commit, this is the important part, in writing to abide by a statement of ethical behavior, and annually, right? So not only in writing, but annually. This is something I think we can definitely do. We will be, over this next year, this fiscal year, we will be trying to figure out the best method and way to have all of us sign off on. So we already have in place in our policy, I know you can't read them, but in our policies and procedures, we already have this 1.3 employee ethics and disclosure policy, which outlines what we would be agreeing to. So in essence, we would take this policy and have every employee, and what we would as well as you as elected officials, sign off on that. Yes, I understand this policy. I've read it and I agree to it, to follow it. Whether that be done, and more likely than not, it will be through an electronic means, right? We have various required trainings that Jason Adamson does and some other things like that that we anticipate we would use some form or another to make that happen. So assuming we can make that happen, that puts us right on the cusp of very low. We would need one of those 2 remaining items. The other item which we think we can do is item number 5, which is have all governing body members complete entity-specific online training at training.auditor.utah.gov within 4 years of term appointment election date. So for each of you, I've provided some information to Jamie, and then we will figure out the same thing. We'll figure out a way and provide you with that link to that training on the state auditor's website. You would simply, at the end of the training, you get a certificate indicating you've completed that training. Obviously, you would then provide that to somebody, myself, or somebody in the city manager's office. And then again, we can check off that box, which then gets us into the very low category, which is in essence our ultimate goal, right? Is to be to that.
So, sorry to interrupt, but so my only question is about, we do all kinds of ethics things in my industry. And I mean, I have a 3-hour test, you know, to figure out your ethics or not. But a lot of it just feels like fluff. It feels like if somebody's a bad person and they're going to do bad things, whether they sign a thing or not, doesn't really make a difference. So I guess my only question is, do we put the whole organization through this? Does it make a difference on, to make a difference on this, or does it really make a difference in the organization?
Well, which side of me do you want me to answer? Because
we've actually had this conversation internally. Yes. We believe we have very tight controls. We believe we have a good system. But if we are just filling out a scorecard as requested by the state auditor, there are certain areas where we fall short because we haven't made, for example, this training. You participating in 3 hours of videos, is that going to make us a better, more ethical organization? We're not really sure that it's going to. So this is something we have to fill out, but it's not something we give a lot of attention.
And that's my concern, is we don't just create things for people to do because it's on checklist, they're typically accomplishing this. In other words, if we say, okay, our theft or our crime or our whatever problem went down 12% because everybody signed this thing.
Nope.
And if it doesn't, do we gain by doing it?
Nope.
But we do worry, though, that there will be somebody who will look at this and say, Orm's not an ethical organization because you don't have the highest score of as determined by the state auditor. Therefore, we're going to be, I guess, this is going to be weaponized in a way where somebody's going to try to find fault because you haven't taken the training and you don't have. I mean, we have an employee handbook. We have employee conduct expectations. We train them that, but we don't have our employees signing specific documents that says we are willing to abide by the following ethical behaviors. They just abide by the entire employee handbook as adopted by the state.
And see, if you want to protect from somebody saying that, you could have the ethics statement and come and sign when they're a new employee and they decide if it's in a while and it's not an every year thing. Anyway, I'm just trying to do things that make sense as opposed to just doing things that lawyers are trying to.
And it's an annual thing, so you have to do it annually. So, I mean, my company, we do it every year. It's a little video for 5 or 10 minutes. You turn it into HR, and you're good. So,
and we do the same things. For example,
it's more just a mindset, like, you know, what is an ethical behavior? What, you know, this situation, how would you react? This is ethical. This is so. It's just basically walking them through and say, hey, this might be, in your mind, might be unethical or ethical, but this is ethical or unethical. And it's just a little thing when you sign it, and I think it's good to check the box, get point.
I will say both of these items, the one good spin, if you will, in regards to either one is at least it makes you think about it, right? If you have to go out and you have to read the employee ethics policy, you at least know it exists, specifically know it exists, and it makes you at least think about it. And same with the elements that are on the training for elected officials. Okay, whether you use it or not, it's up to you. At least it was brought to you and made you think about it, right? Whether that has an end result or not, the state auditor thinks it does. we kind of question that to some degree. So that's why we haven't pushed it in the past. But to Dave's point, yes, if we want to say we got the gold star, then I think that's obviously what we would need to do.
This is every 4 years, so why couldn't you do it as an elected official?
Could, I'm just saying it doesn't make any difference.
I don't know, I haven't done the
I think
training.
you
Well, if they do it, I give you my opinion. I say, yeah, it was good or not, but we got another 20 points, that's 40 points for me.
Because I think it says you have a rank or not, sign it, and then you're good.
Can I ask a question there?
Yes.
So on number 8, does Liberty have a formal internal audit function? It sounds like you have.
We have internal audit functions.
Does that mean that it has to be somebody that works for the entity conducting the internal audit? Because otherwise, I feel like you check that box.
I don't have a formal internal audit function. I have people who do internal auditing. They actually perform, they check P cards, they check payroll, they check petty cash, etc. Right? We review all POs, and those are all internal audit functions. But the term formal internal audit function means there's somebody whose job it is to, if you will, they go out and they check, is this function working? And it's not me. I'm inside of that function doing it. If I'm auditing myself, it doesn't serve the purpose. So that's why it's a third party.
It needs to be a deeper audit than what we're currently doing with an outside audit firm.
Yes. So an outside audit firm would come in, look at our P card process and say, yes, those functions are working as proposed. So that process is good. Oh, let me look at how your petty cash process is, your cash receipting process. They look at each one of those processes and say, yes, that is good. Obviously, our independent auditors, they look at those things too, but they are looking at it from a financial perspective. Do the financial statement, do these controls, are they in place? Do they operate? But do they lead to the financial statements being presented correctly? That's not what an internal audit function does, right? They're just looking at, does it work? That's their only question is, does it do what you say it's going to do?
So Ron Stewart does the financial audit.
Correct.
Or Ron Stewart like person.
Yes.
That's different what you're talking about.
Correct. Now, Ron his firm could come in and do this. Like I said, any independent audit firm could do that. We hired a firm out of Logan last time.
Or technically, Brandon, we could hire an employee and give him or her a specific job description of, you're our internal auditor. You don't report to Brandon. You report to the city's audit committee, for example, and you spend every day of your job auditing functions throughout the organization.
And most organizations that have that are bigger than I assume.
They're very correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So hiring a part-time one can ease some of that without having the expense.
So Brandon, are most cities a low rating? I mean, if we look at Provo, are they a low or a very low?
They would be very low, I believe.
They'd be very low.
Yeah.
So that's kind of low's not good enough. Everybody wants to be very low.
Well, of course.
And if I may,
the smaller the organization, so just to give you some history, this assessment started with small special service districts and smaller towns and cities, because they didn't have any idea what made up a good internal control structure. And so the state auditor's office, as they worked with those entities, created this. And then it kind of grew from that into thinking of, you know what, this is probably a good idea for any board, any elected body to at least have an understanding and have the people who are in charge of finance express to them, yes, we are meeting these, specifically sign off. As you can see, Jamie and I need to sign this document and send it into the state auditor's office. We're stating that, yes, we do these things. So I don't know if that helps answer that question.
Part of the back and forth Brandon and I have had is, for example, I serve on a number of boards in agencies, and they have to complete the same fraud assessment, and they're bringing these fraud assessments to our board, how are they getting a perfect score? And we're a much bigger, more sophisticated with far more internal control than they do. And we're scoring lower. And in part, it's the way people are interpreting this. And they're saying, oh yeah, do we have an internal audit function? Well, yeah, we do a financial audit every year. Check, 20 points.
To Jeff's point.
I have a conversation with Brandon, and Brandon says, no, internal audit is different than financial audit. Hence, we don't get the 20 points. And I'm saying, well, this shop of 7 people that I serve on, they're giving themselves a full check mark. They're getting the 20 points like Dave says.
So to Mayor, to your point, I'm somewhat harsh on ourselves in that regard. Number 8, I can't consciously sign off on that item knowing what that really means and not having the function that intent is for, right? So I don't want to Jamie's point, a lot of others just look at it, go, oh, internal audit function. Yeah. I need the points, puts me in the very low category, I'm good, move on. Yeah. I want it generally to have some element of meaning, right? And that's why number 4 and number 5, I've not pushed because I've not felt that those are going to move the needle, right? Yeah. So, Chris?
I just wanted to comment. The Metropolitan Water District of Warren met this morning. We have to go through the same audit process. We have a fraud risk assessment. Ours is low. It's not very low. We're pushing to get it very low, but we can't honestly get there right now today without making some changes to our policies regarding purchase date as well as conflict of interest. So we're adding a lot of these policies. They're saying that we should add or refine. And so there are some very positive things that occur as a result of this audit that Mr. Bugle was required or requested, especially for smaller local districts or metropolitan water districts. Probably not as effective with the larger things that are more sophisticated.
And Chris, you said you guys took the training.
Yes.
And how long did it take?
About 10 or 15 minutes in the training that we took.
For you specifically,
I'll send you the link.
I have the one for the cities, so I know yours is slightly different.
Ours is smaller, right? But there are positive things that have occurred as a result of this process for us.
And I can see the process being very beneficial, just as far as checking the boxes of the things that make a difference. My issue is just doing things that don't make a difference just to do it. I'm not wired that way, but it's not my decision. It's what you guys want.
Well, I think it also shows that we are following the practices from the state. And if they were to come down and we have a problem, we could show them, we have this, we've done this. And I think it's not to be burdensome.
Yes, it is to be. we don't go there. It is to be burdensome. But you're right.
It helps our bond rating or anything really significant for it. It's a thing we put in the file. It sounds like it doesn't change our bond rating and other costs.
Any final? So again, the idea will be just to make you aware of where we're at. What maybe some of our intent is. We'll be signing this off and sending it up to the state auditor's office. Be working on it throughout the year potentially, and then coming back to you next year.
Giving the other 20 pages just by having a sign and then find out how burdensome the training is.
Right.
So Tom will do the first training.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I got.
If you do 7 trainings for the entire city council, no problem.
All in favor?
All right.
And we'll keep having his name over and over to wipe it out.
Next we've got Gary to do a new chart retirement system.
Yeah, not a presentation. I don't even have any slides or anything.
Okay.
So this is just to give you a little bit of background if you're not familiar with our retirement systems. We do have 2 tiers in Utah retirement systems. Tier 1, and that would be all employees that were hired before July 1st of 2011. And then we have Tier 2 employees that were hired after that date. So most of our new employees are Tier 2, obviously, because they were hired after 2011. So because of the recruitment issues that we've been having in police and in fire, Utah Retirement Systems decided to change tier 2 for those 2 groups only. So we're not talking about our public employees. This is specifically for public safety and fire. So they wanted to enhance that, and in order to do that, they required employees to pick up a portion of the retirement contributions. We as a city back in 2020, when they started this, decided to pick up the employee portion, which was 2.27% at the time, so that employees wouldn't have to pick up any part of that contribution. And we have built that into our budget moving forward. But for 2022, the increase to the employee piece went up to 2.59. And so what we're proposing is that 0.32% we also pick up. And retirement systems require that we do this by a resolution. So that will be on the agenda tonight. It's already built into this year's budget, so it's already been approved. This is just formalizing that additional pickup.
What's the expense?
Actually, I don't know.
Did you find out before the meeting? We're going to vote on something. We got to know what's in the budget. I mean, it should be pretty simple math.
Yes.
For whatever 0.2% or something.
It's probably $30,000, $40,000.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine it's significant. Just to be aware, there are only 2 entities in the entire state that are requiring employees to pick up that portion, and all the other cities are picking it up for them. So for us to not pick it up, it would be very difficult for us to retain employees. Yeah.
So can I ask for
yes, so it's South Ogden and Tremont.
So all of our competition would.
Yeah, all of our sister cities are picking it up.
And this city's in Kansas. Anybody in the state retirement system.
Correct.
So we should start recruiting Tremont.
You know, we've actually, I believe,
Okay.
Any questions? So that'll just be on your resolution, on your consent items here today.
Thank you. Right, next we've got public outreach consideration for the school district study. Mayor and City Council discussion. We're just going to talk about what we're thinking about doing as far as public outreach when the school district study comes out. That's what's come out. Talk to good things. So,
Is that a move back from what it was? Was it mid-June, or have I understood the date? There's always a July
the
date.
draft was June 15th?
Have we seen it?
Contract draft was June 15th, and then July 15th was the due date.
Have we seen the draft?
Okay.
So they're a little behind.
Well, they'll be released at July 12th meeting.
Oh, so we won't see a draft before the July 12th.
Right. That's when everyone will see it. And there will start to evaluate it and review it, that sort of thing.
Is anybody, I think you're a liaison with the Market Renee. Are you hearing some results or not?
I'm not. I'm just an arm's length here, so.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I see that they're meeting with the district. I've seen they've had several meetings with the district just to go through numbers and to collaborate, on getting information. That's the emails I'm included on, but I haven't been.
So what we've got here is this will be introduced on July 12th at the City Council, and that's when we'll have a presentation from the consultant, right, at that City Council meeting.
Will that be in a work session, a presentation, or in a general meeting?
Well, I mean, that's kind of, I think, at your discretion. I think the interest in the plan is probably going to be pretty high, and so we probably won't be able to, for example, hold the meeting this year.
Yeah.
You probably are going to want to hold them in a bigger venue. So it may make sense, for example, that to have a presentation formally and to actually relocate the meeting if there is interest in the bigger venue, like I would call.
Yeah. Okay.
Now what we've got, and this is what we keep needing to work out in this meeting. So we're supposed to receive that presentation from the consultant on the 12th. We're talking about doing the City Council, so that would be a presentation to the City council about the findings, right? Correct. But then we've got, as far as outreach goes, and these are proposed, to do a meeting on the 13th, July 13th, so the day after, July 19th and July 28th. Now, the other side of this is we have to vote on this by what day?
Session on August 2nd.
So we have to vote whether we want to put this on the ballot or not on August 2nd.
Which is 3 weeks after we get a multiple 100-page report.
Right.
Well, I don't know.
It's got lots of pictures, so
Good. But, and we're gonna try to make a community Q&A 24 hours after we get the report. Who's going to lead? Who will have read it?
That's what we've got to figure out. And as far as I think most of the Q&A wouldn't necessarily apply to us.
It wouldn't be us.
It would be the consultants. So we would be there in the meeting with the consultants. We could be asked questions. But as far as anything exceptions, we wouldn't have had time to read that document, right?
Yeah.
Unless we're fast. But so anyway, that's what we need to work out right now. So we got the August 2nd date to vote on it because if we vote against it, then it's no big deal. It doesn't matter if we vote for it. Then what's our next deadline after that? That it has to be put on the ballot.
August 8th is Jody has a deadline. Is that right?
You have a notification deadline on August 8th. Is that right? It's like August 8th.
Maybe 10. I'm sure.
The notification to the county, I got these stats like 25th of August.
Yes.
Right.
I'm gonna say our timelines got kind of goofed. My timeline is completely different than yours. So my brain is over here.
So, but
I think it's a notice to residents that has to go by August 10th. That's because we have a 90-day. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. The next date.
But when does he have? When do we have to have papers in the county have on that? That's not 2020. Yeah. I think that's what you're asking.
So essentially, the council would make a decision on the 2nd of August. If you choose to proceed, then Jody would be required to notify through our regular notification efforts. So on our website, on the Utah Notice website, emails, our intent as a city to move forward to put this on the ballot. And then we would need to have all the paperwork, including the ballot title, which is the question that goes on the ballot, to the county clerk by the 25th of August.
So back up to the August 10th date. What is that for?
That is simply a notice of the city council's intent to put this question on the November ballot.
So this timeline, essentially, that's where we backed into. We can vote on it by August 2nd, so that we can, Joey can hit the August 10th deadline for the county August 25th deadline, right?
That's the best scenario, yes.
Because Jody's notification requirement is 90 days before the general election.
So essentially, what we're looking at is we received this on July 12th. And then we want to have 3 meetings between July 12th and August 2nd. So
you got 3 weeks to report for it.
Yeah, I got 1 day before people are asking me about it.
Well, I see. I'm not defending it. I mean,
yeah.
Discovery investigation.
But as soon as it's released, it's on our transparency board already has it.
Yeah.
So no, everybody who wants it can have it.
I think there will be some citizens who are up to speed on that and will be ready with questions. But there will be others that will read it over the next week. They will be ready for the next meeting and then the next meeting.
I agree we want to move fast because we don't want this holding over us for a year and waiting for next August to make this decision. The big report we need to move fast. I just wish they had given us a draft mid-June as we had anticipated.
Right. Dave, I mentioned you're not required to have public meetings. You're not required to have it the day after. You can. When we spoke the other day, kind of in an informal setting about some suggestions, a lot of people are out of town during July, and we felt that if we spread it out over a 3-week period, somebody can say, well, that's not fair, you had them all in 1 week, and I was out of town.
Well, we don't need that 3. We could hold 2.
You could hold 2. You can never hard to hold any of the steps.
But this meeting is the company that.
No, right.
The other one's gonna be running the show.
And it's almost, I don't know, I was okay with it because I saw the 12th as, some people will see that meeting, but then others might come to the 13th. Couldn't come on the 12th.
Yeah, as long as we're not supposed to be resident experts.
Yeah,
24
I
hours
don't
later.
see our
But
way.
you'll have the microphone.
Good. I want to have a hot mic all the time.
So July 12th will be more a presentation to us, basically present their findings. And then this July 13th would be. That's what we decide.
Or whatever.
I mean, my guess is it would be something where we would take questions from the public.
I think it'd be like Station National, I think, since they'll be answering questions, they people have to submit their questions online or whatever when you get there instead of just everybody yelling out, instead of you ask.
So,
because it could get out.
We have to totally hold forward to it.
let's say, for example, you have a 2-hour walk time. You may want to have, for example, some stations where the consultant can post information about certain outcomes, certain areas that they focus their research on. And then maybe you could take, on the hour, you could say, okay, we're going to take 15 minutes of questions on, from 6 to 6:15, and then the next hour from 7 to 7:15.
So you're talking about more of an educational situation where
yeah,
we can read about the
because,
results of the study.
well, I think we're kind of potentially looking at a hybrid type approach where, because I think if you just have an open mic, I think it becomes somewhat chaotic. It's difficult for people to understand, keep track of, if you want to have a time designated to ask questions, then there's a time in a much bigger setting to ask questions. But then there's also time if you want to have a specific conversation or ask a specific question of the consultant, and you don't necessarily want to do it in front of the whole crowd, the whole group. You can do it in kind of that open house setting where they have more of an opportunity to address your questions specifically, because the consultant's not going to be, if he's got or she's got a room full of people, they're not going to be able to take 10, 15 minutes per question. But in a more intimate kind of conversation in an open house setting, you can have a 5 to 10 minute conversation with the rest of the
So I like that, but at the same time, they might be answering the same question
Over and over again. Yeah.
So,
I think a lot of people will have the same questions.
Yeah.
I think there'll probably be 10 questions that everyone has.
Yeah, that's why, for example, we could collect the questions in advance, so the consultant would have an understanding about what questions are being asked. He or she would say, yeah, 14 residents have submitted the same question. This is probably a question I need to address to the global audience, versus this one question may relate to one specific individual or one specific program at school. That's probably not a question that we could cover in agenda time.
So what you're saying is we want to have them address the questions that apply globally to the bigger audience. And if someone has one question,
which means we'll have to get the questions in advance.
Yeah. I'm going oral like we did.
Yeah. In fact, I asked Pete to kind of put together, and we can make this available. This is just, for example, a mock-up where we said, hey, this is a main one that we would send out. So, hey, we've completed consultants completed the feasibility study. They're going to present the results of the feasibility study on July 12th. We're scheduling specific open houses on these dates. And then the next page, hey, you have a question for the study team, then you can submit the question electronically. To learn more about the study, you can scan the QR code and we'll reference the information we have already available. And I'm anticipating that we would load the study results on this site as well. So people would get this in advance of the 12th, and they would have an idea as to, okay, this is what's happening on the 12th, and these are the 3 meetings that open houses have happened, and they're pretty much the same format, probably a lot of the same questions are being asked.
So like the format, let's say from 6 to 7, we have the displays and everybody's mingling, and then you say 7 to 9 is the questions you get.
It's kind of your call.
I just think you start off with questions. People are going to be there. You're going to want to answer those 10 questions like Jeff says. And then for the individual, more targeted questions, those people can stay and get those answers.
But what if people are running late? You can't. So give them a little buffer.
We can publish the answers to those 10 questions on the same code, can't we?
And I
feel the question that was asked and the answer.
I think every question that's asked will be on the transfer.
Yeah, and I failed to note too that we would record these meetings, so you could go into YouTube, you could watch it live, or you could watch it after we're on vacation, get to the meeting. You can watch it the next day.
Well, if you run out of time, maybe the consultant can go back and answer those questions or answers, so they're on the portal. If we're running out of time that evening or what. So we are transparent that everybody gets their question answered. A lot of them are going to be redundant, right?
If you've only been getting bits and pieces, you have no idea what way this report's going. We may get enough information right away and say, nope, we're not moving forward.
Correct.
And then we can cancel these meetings, right?
Right.
And I did send an email to the city council to say we have 3 options. The first option,
right,
you're not required to do it.
Right.
You can look at it and say, I vote we not put it, or there's a consensus that we not put it on have an August 2nd city council meeting and not have it.
Right. So the only challenge is if we want to provide advance notice to our residents,
we have to let them know beforehand.
We have to let them know beforehand. So we're kind of in this bugaboo situation.
So we have to let them know the first meeting. The next ones we get for 24 hours or 48 hours. We can tell them we're planning to. But none of us will have read it in any detail. I was hoping you were having this great funnel into the future.
But if we are going to send out, some mailer, that we almost build the expectation that we're going to hold these meetings.
Well, and if nothing else, the 13th can be. This was the process. This was the result, and we're done here.
Yeah. You can certainly ask any questions.
Although Jamie's point, if we send out a mailer to talk about 3 meetings, after we just cancel it after the first meeting, you'd be better off just to have the 3 meetings and have the conversation.
But this group decides we're not going to do it. I'll tell you, the attendance of the second, third meeting is going to be pretty nice. But you're right, Mayor. We got a whole.
Yeah.
Well, and there will maybe citizens that will say, why not? Why did you not proceed with this? And it's not just really answer those questions.
We can make an education as far as what the results of the study were. Well, the other thing is that Raiders of the Lost Ark, was there 4 movies or 3? So we could show that next night.
3 lines.
So I really like what I'm hearing about having written questions, because I think what Jeff's saying is absolutely right. They're going to be the same questions probably. And if we have, the mayor's the moderator, he's reading the questions, because what we get in some of these meetings, the same people every time come and dominate the mic.
Yep.
And you've got hundreds and thousands of people in the city who would really like to have a question. They don't want to have to sit listen to that person dominate the mic for 10 minutes with their, whatever their issue is. So
I agree 100%. In fact, the consultants may have, here are questions we think you might ask. They might have a dozen of them already prepared. And mayors at this point, maybe we don't want to allow non-residents to be asking questions. That's been somewhat of an issue when non-residents come in. And if they're not going to be on the voting portal, do we even want to let them ask questions?
But I don't think anyone will be asking questions. No one's asking questions. Because we're going to take written questions.
Yeah, we're going to do written questions.
Thank you. But they ought to say where they're from.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that, that's, so we have teachers also.
Oh, yeah. No, they ought to be affiliated in some way. You're right. Alpine School District employees ought to be able to ask a question.
Open it up, Tom. You're just saying,
I think you just open it up.
You can.
Because if they're not voting.
And what will drive it what makes it the mic is it's a legit question.
Yeah.
That makes sense, right? And a lot of people are
But you're exactly right. It's kind of the point because the questions are coming up.
Jesse.
The slideshow is intended to answer the major questions that are found in the other piece of evidence. So the slideshow will answer some.
That's the Reader's Digest version of the whole report. To your point, Jesse, am I saying that right?
Yeah. Okay. So I would recommend that what happens when the questions come in, that Pete and I or whoever we look at the questions and put it in categories. And so when you ask a consultant a question, here's the question, but here's 3 subcategories to that question. Could you address the question in the 3 subcategories? So that way we don't keep saying, well, we answer that in this.
So are we going to want to have a slideshow that basically is the setup to answering the question?
You want like an executive summary? Is that what we're looking at?
That seems like it might be more effective than having a display.
So I think my sense is they would have something for the 12th. On the 12th, that they would share a presentation that we would share with the council. Perhaps they could amend or modify that to share.
So I've asked that the slideshow, the PowerPoint slideshow, be available when they be the gifts, that they have that on there also. And that the slideshow presentation be within the study. So if anybody says, I missed the slideshow presentation, it will be both within the study and there will be a separate link. Does that answer your question?
It does. I just think it might be effective to kick off the meeting with a slideshow presentation. We're talking about doing like, separate stands with information, do that sort of thing, or we should do a slideshow. And then once the slideshow is done, go into the Q&A. That's why we need to do this meeting is to find how long to go meeting could be, is it partly a slideshow or partly a Q&A? We need to decide on that.
I like 2 hours. I like to do some information and then maybe discuss the questions. And then let those people who want to move it longer and look at things. I heard 3 hours before, and that kind of gets a little. I think it was good.
So when I hear 2 hours, are you looking at 6 to 8, 7 to 9, 6:30 to 8:30?
Well, the question is, the consultant is able to stay later if they answer the question.
They've committed to be here from 6 to 9.
So 6:30 to 9:30.
That's 3 hours.
Oh, I mean, they'll still linger.
Well, they can linger.
Before we
But the announcement meeting.
So, 7 is when ball games start, and school programs start. It seems to be the magical number for a lot of.
7.
So,
but you're only going to stay until 9. Cutting them off a half hour.
I'm sure they can stay longer if we ask them. They asked what their commitment would be, and I said 6:30 to 9:30 seems reasonable. But if you want them to stay till 10, I'm sure.
I'm just saying we want to make sure that if there's questions being asked, if somebody wants to stop at 6:00 o'clock, they have that opportunity and not shut the door.
I don't think we'll be talking for 2 hours.
The main meeting would be 7 to 9. 7 to 9. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
I just think like Mary says, earlier than 7, then you're getting up work and getting all that. So 7 to 9. Do you want to have remote displays that have information on them, or do you want to just have a slideshow and Q&A? Do you remember the State Street, how they had remote displays? You want to have remote displays that talk about the results of the study, and then the slideshow and the Q&A, or do you want to just get the remote display?
Can they have display?
I didn't care for the remote display because I don't know if you're going to have time to do that a lot.
Yeah.
So I would prefer not to have remote display because none of us have the ability. We just got the report. So yeah. So I don't know who could be there to answer the questions other than the guys who did the study should be the ones there. If they're standing there.
If you want to go right in Q&A at 7, I'll get.
Yeah, presentation at 7, and then a Q&A. Because you could, the report will be online then. They can pull up the charts.
We also have hard copies if people want to look at it.
Would you want to?
Would you want to
have the presentation once?
If you come to open house, I want to.
Once at 7 p.m. They start off at 8 p.m. or just one presentation.
How long do you take your presentation? Just have to have enough time, right? For the presentation.
Well, the attention span of people is pretty short when you get to a presentation. So I asked them to in the study, and that's the presentation. If you want the presentation to follow live, they're not going to add to it. So between the 9 and 11 slide market.
Okay, so that might be a half hour, and the rest will be Q&A.
I would hate to cut off the Q&A trying to see.
Yeah.
I think since we're having 3 meetings, I don't know, just check with it.
I was just going to ask, do you anticipate having any here from Coffee School District? As well, as part of a presentation, it would just be the company that's doing the.
Can we just do the study that's doing the results of the study, and then anyone would be welcome to be there, and we would go through the questions that are submitted. Yeah, I like the idea of just doing your slideshow once, and then having questions, and then having a max 2 hours. If you want to talk afterwards, whatever they could.
You have 10 questions. You got 10 minutes of questions. So you're gonna have some good answers.
Yeah. We have also considered setting up, for example, some feedback portals where people can come and they can type their comments and their feedback. You already at the meeting, or they can just go online and do it. It's up to you how you want to structure. We can have computers on site where people can sit down and enter their comments, or you can say you have additional comments. You're welcome to go to this website and enter them on one of your keys.
I think the questions would be more useful than comments. I think like comments based on what I've seen on Facebook can be all over the place. And I like to have a meaningful conversation. That's where I think, serious questions can be useful. With what's going on today with the election, there's not a place where we need to put comments. I just voted for what I wanted to vote, yes or no, yes or no. I don't think I need to share my opinion about this guy. Let's try and nail down these dates. So the ones that are proposed, we can probably change these. Second about July 12th, we're not meeting. July 13th, 19th, and 28th. Those are the proposed dates. So those dates.
And those are when they can do it. They confirm those.
They confirmed those dates.
13th, 19th, and what was the
28th.
And that recommendation came out of our meeting with Jamie and some of the city people. And then I went back to him and said, we wanted to have one every week. That was the recommendation.
And you had a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. And it's not all of us will be able to make it every time. I don't assume that. We're not sitting on the stand if it's always all right words.
Well, that's a good question. Because the city council could be asked questions. I mean, not specific to the study, but just random questions about their thoughts on something to do with the school district. So I don't know if we have any opinions on.
I'll be there.
Okay, as far as do we have
sitting on the stand or just in the audience.
So we can sit up there and throw it. During the presentation, probably not, but Q&A, we're not going to answer questions that we can answer.
Well, I'm saying, what if it's just asking a question to a specific elected official about their thoughts on something?
We can answer that. I have no problem.
So would we? So Jamie would be up on the stand with the consultants, or would we be up on the side and would go answer?
I would discourage you from being up on the stand.
I don't think this is a city council meeting, because if you do have a quorum that's up there, you can be in the audience with your spouse, and as long as it's not an official meeting. Can you help me on this one?
I think we need to notice. I think it still needs to be an official meeting, but that doesn't mean they have to be up on the stand. They can still be in the audience. It doesn't mean they have to take questions.
My concern is if you're up there, then it kind of suggests that you are going to respond to questions. I think probably closer to the first couple of rows to have you there. And
maybe just the mayor pro tem should sit up there.
So how do we decide when it's official meeting? There's not a quorum.
Well,
this is a city matter. So, I mean, technically, I think.
I think we want to notice it as a meeting just in case there are 4, certainly. And if they're not 4, then it's maybe not an official meeting, but you can still have the meeting and, you know, give the information.
Or do you want us to sign as certain ones to come to?
No, I like his idea, make it an official meeting, and that way.
We're recording it, Aaron's right.
So Steve, we're not even, as a city council, we're not voting on it until August 2nd. So we're still back gathering and reading the study like everybody else.
Yeah, in fact, I probably, you know, the question was raised, do you want to respond to comments about how you feel? I would probably discourage you from doing that until you've had a chance to participate in all those meetings and hear all the questions and the answers, digest all the information, and then have that discussion of whether you want to vote for it or not on August 2nd.
So this will just be the consultant, a moderator reading questions. Probably.
That could be you, Mayor.
No, I think it probably makes sense to have the consultant do that. You can say, here are the questions that we've received, you know, and they can take the ones that are deemed to be the most important, the most commonly asked questions, and answer those.
I actually think that would make them look unobjective. So I think the questions should go to the city, and somebody like the mayor should say, these are the questions we received.
Sorry, yeah, that's a good point. I didn't mean that they were the ones determining which questions were most important, but they were the ones that were saying, these are the ones that have been determined, not that we made that determination.
There should be somebody probably conducting the meeting to keep order and all the rest.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, so is everyone okay with those dates? 13th, 19th, 20th, 13th, 19th, 28th, 2nd. And the second is
12th city council.
Second.
12th.
And the second is 12th and the second.
Yeah. Okay, so we're adding 3. That third meeting could change the first 2, depending on the questions and how they might be tired. I mean, they may not.
And then we learned from the first one, Dave, the mayor, that it didn't work, and we tried something, something different.
And that's actually a really good point. We could continue to submit questions for upcoming meetings. We don't have to do the same questions.
Right. So that then we're down to where to have the meetings. Library Hall is an obvious place for at least one. We could do all 3 in Library Hall. Or we could do Library Hall and try and get a couple of other locations to spread it around the city.
This is City Hall, I think.
Yeah,
it's less confusing.
Well, where is there one other place to handle that?
You can do the high school. Mountain View's the biggest.
Well, then you can do that.
Well, we have to pay for that. Oh yeah, well you did pay for it. You continue to pay for it, but pay for it. So
I think Library Hall makes sense.
Yeah, I think
so. You think Library Hall
is consistent. Same place every time, and I think, you know, there's plenty of parking.
Okay. Any other issues with these that we need to figure out?
Just that we, I don't know if we approve what you sent out, but I think what you have for people.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was just a mock-up that Pete put together today without any details. Pete can take the details now. I can take those.
Okay.
I'll feed that information to Pete, and he can send out a mock draft.
So Jamie, I wonder if that could be a statement stuffer. And utility bills done.
Oh.
I mean, when you get maybe utility bills, the problem we have is we send out the utility bills a batch a week. So we do 4 batches. So we won't be able to hit all. So we'll have to do it as a separate mailing. So we would do it as a front and back postcard, essentially.
Like the station house.
Yes.
And every address.
Yes.
Okay, I think
Is
that's.
that the mailing to announce the meetings?
Yes.
You got a QR code or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty simple. It doesn't include any information of any gigs.
How does this integrate with the information portal we've got right now?
So the information portal, this QR code, and this web address would be essentially the destination that we would reference people to. So until July 12th, all of the information that's currently there would be available, and then after the 12th, we would load up the study. So they would have
And the QR code would go right to the study.
Yes.
Link to the questions, is there separate ones?
No, so this would take us right into the, essentially the school district study home page. And then we would have a click on this feasibility study, click on questions being asked, click on
some other questions.
Yeah, and it's already a website people are familiar with through this whole process. We're just keeping it all in one spot.
So we will have a list of questions. I mean, I know the 13th is going to be, we'll still be gathering questions and have for them, but can we list the questions that were asked on the 13th and then say, here's the video of the answers, so then we're not having people continuing to submit the same question over and over. They'll see that question is here, and then if they watch that and want more clarification, then they can submit something.
Or if we're asked a question, we can easily refer them to here's the question, here's the answer.
That would just stop some redundancy. That's how much we're looking. Okay.
And with this, I don't even know if the consultants have a website where they're going to be putting this study up, explaining it, but you know,
I'm not in charge of their website. I'm sure they are.
I just looked at their website before the meeting today. It's pretty scary. I mean, it's pretty simple. So I would imagine this would probably be a better portal. It has more information, and it's city specific. So I think we have more. I think we have more hits, more people traveling to this site.
All right. Any other concerns, questions, issues on this?
I just make one other comment. When people ask a question, let's just get to the core of the question. Because a lot of people, when they ask the question, tell their political side or their views. So let's just stick with the core of the question and not read whether they're for or against it. And so let's just try to be objective in the question.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, we will have to sift through the questions. Like you say,
how do you want that to look?
People could ask the same question. It's all data down to one question.
Yeah.
So they're going to come in on here with their questions, and then from there they're going to at the meeting library all sift it through. So I don't know. Who's going to change that process with something like that?
Yeah, because the objective is educational, right?
Right.
It's not a debate.
It's not a debate. It's just here's what the report said.
My sense is there are going to be a series of themes that will develop, with patterns that will develop within questions. The effort would be to essentially try and find questions consistent as the person. Right. Like, for example, is this going to improve? Is a study split going to, or a split district going to improve student testing scores? Or is it going to lower my taxes? Or is it going to result in teacher pay decrease class size? Yeah, class sizes. Is it going to improve or decrease class size? I'm guessing those are some of the themes that may manifest on.
Odds are, we look down 10 or 12 questions that are. Okay.
And these guys are no dummy. They should know what the questions are that are going to be outside. Right. And Lene, you can work with them on some of that too. But just say, hey, these are the things I think the citizens are going to be mostly concerned with. We just spewed out half a dozen of those. If you could help them with that, so they're ready to go. We want them to be the best prepared they can be.
Yeah.
And in fairness, we did give them all the questions that you could support.
Okay.
And I do think that they were broad enough to cover the nature of the
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. We well armed this.
Any questions? I mean, since the council or elected officials, any questions that any of you have, we should make sure they get submitted through this. So they can be asked.
What's school lunch? I want to know that.
What's school lunch?
May I follow up on Dave sent a text to me a couple nights ago regarding how the sports work if there's a new district. And so I presented that to them and said, please add this to the study. So they reached out to USHA. Yeah, they reached out today with specific questions and they got answers back. So if you have any other questions, it's getting pretty close where they're pretty final now. So if you have any other questions, get them to the analysis. If they're not already included, we will do the research to include it.
Hey, question on the water, so yes, for you. You gotta tell me my number. I am. So it's between 30 and 40 is Jamie. 38. Sorry, good, Jamie. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It was all right.
All right, let's move on to this topic. We're talking about development review committee process revisions.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight, we just want to go over some things that we've modified in our process. We haven't really changed the process. We've called meetings a little bit different. We have been a little more strict on some of the application processes, which we'll kind of go through tonight.
You're gonna have to speak up.
Yeah. Too soft? Okay.
Absolutely.
I'll try to yell. How's that? But don't get offended if I yell too much. Okay. So our DRC, which is a Development Review Committee, is what DRC stands for. Application processes are due every Monday at noon. And we have in the past allowed applications, if they're missing one or two items, to make application and work to get that process in. We have since changed that to allow, we reject any project application, that is not complete based on ordinance or checklists that we have available for the applicant. The application and checklists are all the same. So when somebody gets an application for a site plan, for example, the checklist comes along with that application. So it's one document. So there's no way that they cannot see that they need to have everything that's applicable on that checklist. We do have some applicants that, designate that it's not applicable. As we look at it at the counter, we'll let them know that, no, it is actually applicable. Here you go, come back next week and resubmit. So that's kind of our process as far as applications are due every Monday at noon. If somebody comes in at 2 o'clock on Monday, it goes on the next week. It just automatically gets bumped to the next week. We're pretty hard line on that specific thing just to help the process move forward. In the past, we've had a technical design review committee. So design review committee has been used in multiple meetings as it deals with the process. We have a Thursday meeting, which, and then the following Monday meeting, which we're in sequence with each other to not only do the technical, but also then coordinating those requirements. So we've changed the technical design review committee meeting to technical coordination meeting. That's where the public works people, all the public work, all those, our staff, engineering staff, fire, all those get together on that Thursday meeting and technically look at does the sewer work, does the water work, does all the different things like that technically work for that project. They make their comments. And then we've changed the meeting that used to be called Policy Design Review Committee, which is on a Monday, which when the staff, Ryan and myself, meet in those meetings to go over all the comments that were made on that previous Thursday meeting on those projects, before we then send them out to the agent for the applicant and the engineer. We send out the corrections not only to the applicant, but also whoever they designate as their agent. Most of the time it's going to be their engineer or their architect or things, but we make sure that the owner also gets a copy so that they know what the issues are. We've had in the past some developers that have said, well, I don't know why the city's taking so long because they didn't get the comments. And so the engineer, for whatever reason, was blaming the city for not getting this sequentially through. So we've now, it's been a couple of years that we've done that, actually sent out to the owner as well. So they're well aware of what is coming down the process. And then we've, on Monday now at 11 o'clock, we have what's called the official design review committee meeting. So now we've basically, by ordinance, there are 7 members of that team. So instead of making any decisions in the technical coordinating meeting or the Monday coordinating meeting, now it's held at 11 o'clock, where we get together the 7 members of that team, which are made up of police, 1 from police, 1 from fire, 1 from legal, 2 from public works, and 2 from development services, that then actually hold a meeting and then vote on that, whether or not it's a complete project and ready to move forward. So if it's in the process, technical review, they still have corrections, and it goes back through that process again and again until it gets cleared out of that and then gets scheduled for the DRC meeting. In the last month and a half, 2 months that we've been holding this project or process, we have not held meetings every Monday. So we haven't had projects that have always been on that Monday meeting. So we've canceled a few. And if they're not ready, we just don't hold the meeting. It is legally noticed. We do notice it in on the state website. We do notice it in our city center, so it is a publicly open meeting. The door obviously is open to room 107. We hold that specifically there. We do take minutes. We record the meeting, and we also then do a formal motion on that item to make sure that it's complete. Our planning staff will make the presentation, and then it's only after that's gone through that development review committee that it's deemed a complete application. So that's kind of the question we've had in the past. So this is the process that we've updated to make sure that this is the meeting, this is the designation, and if it gets to that point, and we've made that approval through that designated through ordinance, that this is the committee. Once it's done that, then it will go on then to Planning Commission, City Council as a complete application. So any specific questions on this process?
So Steve, is that the vesting point?
Well, that's a good question. And I actually have a couple of questions on this as well. It's complicated, put it that way. I mean, basically an application is complete when they have submitted all of the elements, right? That are required by ordinance for a site plan application. So, and this is something maybe I need to talk to these guys a little bit about, but for example, we have a requirement for a stormwater pollution prevention plan, which oftentimes historically developers haven't submitted until farther down the process, right? So I don't know, is this something you're going to require from them up front or?
No, not necessarily. So that's a good question, Steve. So let's say the traffic impact study is on the checklist, but engineering decides or deems it's not necessary. This formal motion at the design review committee meeting is when we basically say, we don't need that traffic impact study. We don't need that storm drain at that point. We're deeming it complete at that point, and then we're working with them on those other issues if needed, or we're exempting them from them.
So sorry, this is probably a discussion that the council doesn't really want to hear because it's going to bore you to death. But I mean, essentially what I'm suggesting is that maybe there are certain items that are required by ordinance that we will not necessarily require a developer to submit in order for us to begin processing it, but which we would require them to submit for it to be legally vested.
That's what I
Correct.
So I guess to answer your question, I think maybe where we're saying application not deemed complete, I think that determination would be, we're willing to move forward on the application, but we're not making a determination that your application is complete and vested.
It's a possibility to do as a condition as well, right? If that's something that's the only outlier, we could say.
But I don't think you can say it's conditionally vested though.
No, you're right.
So, but anyway, this is a discussion I think we can have internally.
So, and I think the purpose for this is so we can get consistency because of issues with that, right? So that's what you're saying, right? You're trying to determine.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is some things that are required by ordinance, it doesn't always make sense to require them at the outset before we will start processing, like your SWIFT, for example. So that's what I'm saying is we maybe have a checklist that says, here's what you need for us to accept and start processing your application. But the fact that you have all these items doesn't mean that you have a complete vested application, because some of the required items we understand won't typically be submitted until later on down the road.
After planning commission?
But yeah,
sometimes even after planning.
Correct.
But isn't it vested once the planning commission hears it?
Correct.
So if it goes to the planning commission, then it's vested once the planning commission hears it, right?
Well, that's a good question.
So
but then in our ordinance, it's all good.
With our current situation with some litigation, because this is a conversation we might not want to be having right now.
Yeah.
I think it's probably be advised not to, maybe table this for another time.
I apologize. I thought we had this ironed out. This was the direction we were following. So
no, but I think I understand where you're going. I think it's good. Some of these are just kind of technical details. But anyway, sorry. I mean,
internally, you guys will talk and then bring it back.
At least for my benefit, if I may, there may be things. An applicant will come to the design review committee. They may still have outstanding red lines, or they may have questions tied to, let's say, a traffic study. Does do all red lines need to be resolved? Do all issues, including issues associated with traffic study, need to be resolved before they can come to the design review committee and receive final approval?
I would say 99%. There might be a minor exception that will allow, because they just can't work it out, and like a UDOT letter or something will condition that they provide that.
But if they presented something and the fire hydrant should have been 50 feet to one direction versus where it is today,
it needs to be all complete.
They would need to come back the following week essentially revisit with the DRC and say, we've made the corrections, we're ready.
Well, the way that it works right now, Jamie, is the technical coordination meeting and the money coordination meeting are the two meetings that are going to rotate those projects through. And once everything is done, so it's going to be complete before it ever gets to the DRC. We're not going to send it back unless there's some reason we've discovered something that's, oh, by the way, what about this? We forgot about that. Excellent. Then it would be 2 weeks. Otherwise, it's going to be complete before it ever gets to the DRC.
So maybe a clarification, the underlying statement you've got there, application not deemed complete until DRC approval. Maybe you change that terminology a little bit to say not deemed ready to go to planning commission until DRC approval, because the complete term is kind of a loaded term.
And I think we should probably, let's visit, if we may, offline to hear Councilman Peterson's suggestion.
Sounds good.
I guess the intent of sharing this today was to tell you we are sensitive to the feedback you have given us, and we're wanting to make sure that that process is tight.
I think I understand the process. I work the whole.
Yeah.
I just.
I got an email inviting you guys, I think, this meeting.
So our direction was to make sure the council knew that those meetings were held Mondays at 11. They are open. You're welcome to come. We're not expecting you to come every time. You should have gotten an email today too that showed you what's on this week's agenda.
Yes.
So if there's something on there that you're saying, hey, I want to find out more about it, obviously I would rather you come in and talk to us personally rather than come to that meeting. But you're welcome to come to the meeting. It's an open meeting. It's an invitation to attend, but we're not expecting you to come to that meeting.
We've just added you as an information item so that you're aware of what's coming.
You will be getting an email every week based on what's on the agenda that week. But
I would like the opportunity to, maybe if those customers want to meet with you guys, have a meeting with you guys and kind of share some of the feedback that I personally received on helping create a better relationship between the residents and the developers. How we can facilitate good relationships.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Got Steve Earl.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we'll grab some food and we'll have it come back before we start.
Seems TV phones chat.
Somebody like to offer a blessing on the food.
I can do it. We're doing louder, but we have to gather and discuss the business of the city and community access food. It'll be somebody that will provide nourishment and strength to us. We're grateful for those who organize it and provide it for us. And we ask these favors and blessings in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, these ones here just aside are the unwitches. So if you want the no bread option,
Which side?
the one sitting here on the left. Yeah. The short side. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Okay, the young witch.
Oh, yeah. She jumped in the trash and said, oh, never mind. By the way, you're shout out.
They did well. I took my own. Yeah, I know.
And the guy from the NHL is like,
I was just reading through your today, so I thought I
if there was a year protected
yeah, I think what we want is probably put that on.
Josh, how are you?
Well, yeah, you know
My home tax was $7,700.
Yeah, by statute, I don't think that letter is required.
Pull out, you know.
So I don't think we can have an official requirement.
Yeah, there's no.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Who wants cookies?
What's that?
Oatmeal raisin. I'm not trading, I'm just kidding. Anybody want?
last meeting, so I'll have to give some information.
So, I don't know, several weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, Lene and Debbie kind of approached Jason and I about doing a new ordinance regarding parking for residential developments. And by that, we mean developments with attached residential units, not single family dwellings. And basically the idea was to consider a requirement that required parking stalls be within a certain distance of the unit that they serve, as well as requiring an assignment of parking stalls for the exclusive use of individual residential units. So I think that, Lene and Debbie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the concern was, number one, trying to enhance safety for residents of dwellings so that the less distance they had to walk, particularly late at night, the safer they're likely to feel. As well as, maybe have people who have mobility issues, make it a little bit easier for those people. So, and the other, was one other reason too, and now I can't think of it. Anyway, so we came up with this draft language. This is in our general parking ordinance. So created 2 additional proposed subsections. The first one, as you can see from the title, requires an assignment of, essentially, in most cases, it would be 2 parking stalls for each residential unit that would be for their exclusive use. So they would have some official designation that's for their own use. And then the second part is the proximity aspect of it, requiring that required parking be located within 175 feet of the unit that it serves. When we talked before, we had some discussion about what that number should be, whether it should be 175 or should it be 150, 200, something else. I think there's a different range of opinions on that. So that certainly would be something that's up for debate. But again, this is just a draft, and subject to any changes you might like to make, or if you just want to scrap it entirely. I think this is just kind of to get the discussion rolling, if you will, and talk about if this is something you're interested in moving forward, or if you're not. So I think there are, there's some pros, like we talked about, to doing this. I think there's also some potential downsides to it, some potential unintended consequences. Maybe Ryan could speak to those a little bit better than I can. Ryan, do you mind just maybe saying what some of your concerns might be or something like this?
Yeah, just one of the concerns is thinking about it this morning is when, and quite frankly, there's not a lot of opportunities in R&D to build these projects right now, so I don't know how much that matters. We aren't going to see any of these but a lot of developments will center a green space around their buildings or a clubhouse. So I'm thinking of a complex in American Fork my son lives in. They have a big green field, units around the green field, and then the clubhouse and the pool are right there. In this, I think one of the unintended consequences is you may surround your buildings with parking on all 4 sides for proximity. So then you're going to have your green spaces not up against the buildings, creating a more enjoyable development. They're going to be isolated, or you're going to have to cross parking lots to get to those play areas. And that it kind of will affect the design of the development, is kind of what could be
another potential unintended consequence that I've thought about too is it does take away a little bit of flexibility from, say, an apartment manager. I mean, you might have an apartment that's rented out to one person and you only have one vehicle, and if you're requiring the 2 stalls be assigned to that unit, you're effectively wasting a stall that nobody else can use. And I think that an apartment manager would say, look, give us the flexibility to assign, the use of these stalls out on an as-needed basis, depending on what our tenants are like. So anyway, there's some pros to it, there's some cons to it. So
our main concern was really safety and making sure that it was like, I'm okay if someone only has 1 car. What do you think about that?
Well, I think when we spoke about that, we talked about that that would be an individual management issue. candidate.
Which part were they on the?
Where is, if there were an apartment where someone lived there and they only had one car, there were 2 cars.
Assigned to that,
Assigned
yeah.
to that unit, with the manager then have the opportunity or the ability to sublease that from that condo owner. Or I don't know what correct wording is there.
Yeah, the difficulty is making the two elements of this work. Number one, that all the parking stalls are within 175 feet, which that basically essentially means you have to designate them on a site plan. So you know which parking stalls go with which units, so you can measure that they're within 175 feet, right? But then if you do that, then you lose the flexibility for an apartment manager to adjust. Well, there's only one tenant here, we're going to assign that extra parking stall to somebody else. So that's the challenge, I guess. One way of addressing that might be to say, instead of requiring them to designate and assign 2 units per unit, maybe you only say one stall per unit, and then they have some flexibility with the other one.
So I'm just going by experience with the townhomes by my house. And I most definitely did not try. She tells the story that she was on the board there and that they had lots of problems with, she'd come home from work at 5:30, 6 o'clock, and there was nowhere to park. She parked way out on the street. In front of her home, she didn't have a place to park. So then the board decided the way to remedy that was to do 1 covered spot and 1 other spot. It actually, the way it worked out is it was across the way, So within this, they were actually within 125 feet. But and she said that just alleviated all of the complaints. The residents felt like they were, it was their home, and they were treated like homeowners in a way that they knew they had a place to park when they got home. Versus the whole students mantra, right? I don't know if you guys went through that, but it was always, I'm going to get a parking car when I get back to my place. Parking property. So I think the intent here is to create something where there's more security and safety and equal treatment for apartment dwellers as people who live in single family homes. They know we're going to have 2 spots in their house when they get there. So I felt like the tenants in apartments should also have that issue. We have problems in Provo right now. In some homes, I had a woman tell me she doesn't have a spot in her house. That neighborhood's lived out. Now that's a home and that's an older neighborhood. But I understand what you're saying to me. If there's an issue of an unused parking spot, that's something that the management can deal with. I don't think we're going to police that. Are we?
Once you stand up, Stephanie, once they did it for 1 spot.
They had 2 assigned spots per town.
Oh, they didn't do 2.
Yeah, 1 covered and 1.
I don't really know this, but I just think that overcome the anything consequences. If you have 1 assigned spot, that's your spot, and then your other spot is your 4th spot. That might have always overcome.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Do other communities have anything like this that you know of?
I haven't looked to see. I'm not aware of any, but I haven't really looked.
The ones. I'm sorry. What?
Yeah, I agree with you. I just saw this morning. So we haven't.
I think of the place, the mayor, when you spoke at the Woodbury and Peg one, most of the homes aren't within 175 feet of a parking structure because the parking structure at one end and then they're not physically that close to any park.
And that's the issue that I feel is the problem.
Well, but your safety, right?
Yes.
But they're well lit and you're walking by a lot of homes between the parking structure and that. So it's not like you're out on a dark street.
Yeah, but if I'm stopping at the grocery store and picking up my groceries, I'm gonna walk to the football field to get to my house where I live. I have to go back and forth to get my groceries from my car.
Oh.
There's that one too. I mean, I think I just keep coming back to the people who live in apartments. They're people too. We seem to have a lot more people renting now than ever own. And so that's the trend. And let's let them have the safety and safe lifestyle of some of those homes, meaning the safety of the parking spot. And I feel like 2 is very reasonable. I could see the instance where you have 1, but I
in a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, is that the norm? I don't know. And to your point, Brian, I mean, I actually think it drives a better development. I think it provides for better planning, more space. The ones I've seen, anyway, instead of the whole, there's the apartment complex and there's the parking structure, it lends itself to more beautification and make it more residential type development. And Amaron has a clubhouse with a swimming pool. It has green space all around. They tilted the buildings.
I think townhomes though are a different product than stack. I agree with you. With townhomes, I think it works because your parking is always. But to Councilman McDonald's point with Green on Campus Drive, that would be a different product because parking is spread out. But I would also
say more to the college model you're talking about, right? The college model.
I don't know. I mean, I just feel like if you don't cut down on some of it, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get parking in a parking structure, football field away, and you've got the same problem. I didn't like walking those distances. I lived in Raintree and I had to park in the North 40. I didn't like walking. I mean, I got home at midnight and the library closed. I
think we can look at the safety issue and maybe look at it further in depth. Maybe you can do some research on it based on what other cities have.
Some unintended consequences. These sound good. I just don't know what happens.
Right. So I think safety is our #1 key, and it has to be safety. And it's 175, 150, 145. I think I can do that. I think that's safe. But let's get some data.
I agree with that. I think it's an interesting idea to pursue and look at. Look at it. Where we should go with it.
Okay, on it.
Yep.
Want to we're going to review the agenda. Item number 3, city council reports, boards and commissions.
No, we do that once a month, so this is not all. So there's no report.
Are we never something that was going to come from the arts? Something stay tuned for art? Is that regionally boxes or what was that announcement going to be?
Nate Prescott has published the website where they're collecting art submissions from local artists, and then the Arts Council or a subgroup within the Arts Council will review them, and we will contract with a local contractor to vinyl apply them to the boxes. $300 to use the image. We don't own the image outright. They can still sell that piece of art or reproduce it themselves, but that was the just on one box. And if we had it was in a social media post or something like that, we would have the permission to use it.
How many we have budgeted for this year? I can't remember.
We can do about 30.
30. If you look at it, there's some really great artists locally.
Yeah, it is last year's. It is the money from last year. Nate and Christian were working on the website for kind of a landing zone for art submission, and so that's been published now. And the Arts Council will receive the submissions, and either a group of them or the whole group will select.
As far as local artists, how local is it?
I don't think that it's been restricted. I think it's just been advertised locally.
Cassie Barney did art. She's local. The one at Sarah. Have you seen that one? Kind of behind the stage. She's a local artist. Maybe because our May done it earlier. What else have we done?
There's a piece that Just Smart Smiley has contributed, and Cindy Clark, who was on the Arts Council, contributed a piece. So we're in the works to put those out.
So far, they've been helpful.
Like forum. I'm just curious if you want to go wider, like wider. You want to forum.
I don't think there's a problem with it going outside of Orem. We've done, in the past, we've had an Orem kind of roots art show, and we have a lot of artists who started in Orem. They grew up here, they went to high school here, they've lived in Orem for some time. So there's a lot of people who have a real affinity for Orem, but they may be in other areas now.
I think we're more excited about what it actually looks like and how attractive it is. And I mean, I think that's what the art council will look at. What's the quality of the production and what they're expecting to do.
Okay. I'm just having people ask me about it.
Yeah.
Okay. I have 4 application out of 5 type agreements.
My husband and my dad.
Okay. I'll make sure.
Well, I gotta they told me. And you and I.
Here's item number 6, mayor's report. Item report by council. What is that?
You don't have any reports.
So that's just
says mayor's report.
Yeah, there's no committee or commission that's.
You could do a song instead. You could put in there.
Be a manager, yeah.
Yeah, you should.
It's not trick. And we'll go with the consent items. We got resolution, top rights, participation, Valley Home Consortium. What is that?
That is the follow-up from Ken Matthews' presentation last month. So
Defensively high.
where we participate rather than just working independently, get together with Utah County local consortium projects throughout the county. Essentially get better advantage of in some spots.
So when we had that discussion, she made a comment about, because we talked about the role of the modeling versus some of the options. Is that something that has to be corrected by someone? How do we say, hey, can we start looking at this?
In terms of remodels versus the new, I think that's just encouragement to Ken to focus more. That I can have that conversation.
Item 8.2, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Miller will serve Councilman Peterson's authority.
We pull that off anytime.
You want to have a little discussion on that too? The job that you do, brother.
Nah, I'm good.
Item 8.3, resolution on state contribution amendment. At 9, ordinance amending chapter 23 of the Oklahoma City Code for stormwater control. We have a presentation on that.
That's the best item on the agenda.
This is the follow-up to
What's your language?
2 weeks ago.
We'll have an ordinance amending fiscal year 2021 budget.
Basically 3 elements. Either unique or large.
Okay.
Right. There, you might want to know that this does require a public hearing that has been noticed. It just to get on the agenda.
So
9.1.
9.2.
So after they do their presentation, open up the public hearing.
Yes.
I think they're here. The eagle has landed.
Item 10, Jamie has.
I just have a couple of items. I'm happy to just come in quick items right now.
One.
Yeah, okay. Just by way of information, our staff has switched to a new timekeeping system. We work with our programming team. This is the first pay period that we launched that time code system. So I want to give a special shout out to Carrie and her team and our IT programming team. All of our employees now
Historically, we've had some who have entered time online. We've had others who have been using paper time cards. So now we are all electronic. All of our employees will enter their time electronically, and we have a particular app that's been developed that all of our employees can use and access and enter their time. So that's a significant.
That's for non-exempt.
And exempt by exception. So all employees in the city submit time cards. Those that are hourly employees submit specific hours of time cards. Those that are non-exempt just no vacation sick time. But this is the first time we've had all of that electronic. So we're very happy about that. Very appreciative of the IT staff as well as Carrie and the HR team for doing that. And then just the other item, we were notified last week that Congressman Curtis has included a $3 million appropriation into the Environmental Protection Agency appropriation or budget for water reuse. So our water reuse project that we have been working, Eric was involved, and of course Chris and Reed were involved in meeting with Congressman Curtis's office and Brent. Sorry, I don't want to leave anybody out, but that has been included and is the result of Congressman Curtis's efforts. So we're really appreciative of him. In the last month, we had an $18 million project. We only had about $9 million to build this project. In the last month, thanks to the efforts of many, we now have $19 million to build 18 million. We're very excited about that. And we're hoping that the $18 million project when we rebid is actually $14 million. We see that all the time.
That happens when the money goes from underwater.
Yes, yeah. So while it's not final, it still has to go through a what do you call it? The conference and the House and Senate reconciliation. It needs to go through a reconciliation process. But that's we're on the absolute right track. So very, very much appreciate everybody's efforts. And now we have $10 million more for a project that we thought was dead a month ago. So I'm excited about that.
The tank, is that the, what do you call it?
And the drill rig has been mobilized, and we are drilling a new well. And it is a continuous effort, so we can't, once we start, we can't stop. So we have sound walls set up. We have one sound wall.
It's huge.
It is, how tall is that? 30 feet?
Is it only 30? Like it's not 3 cents.
So yeah, we'll let you know when we hit Middle Earth.
You sent out an email today about the groups who want the cul-de-sac block.
Yes.
What's the end result there?
So I'm sorry, I communicated with the mayor that we set that out. We essentially have an individual who came in and made application for a subdivision. And the suggestion of neighbors is rather than connect streets, that we create two cul-de-sacs. For a variety of reasons, it's staff's opinion that for utility, public safety, and convenience and circulation purposes, it makes more sense to have the street run through. But there are obviously some neighbors that are interested in wanting to keep it as a cul-de-sac. I don't, I think it's staff's recommendation that we connect the street. I think we could have the cul-de-sac. It's going to cost the property owner more money. It's going to require more of his property. And it's not going to obviously address the issues associated with utilities and public safety and circulation. But technically, we could do that. The issues with...
Does it cost much more to do it as far as utilities?
Yes, because rather than connecting the utilities, they actually have to loop the utilities in both cul-de-sacs. So you're actually having to do more work on the storm and the sewer. And the sewer
is a particular problem because the sewer line to the west is a foot and a half lower than.
I'm not sure.
When I talked to Sam, the engineer, because of the elevation of the sewer in that area, they're actually going to have those homes sit higher out of the ground to get the gravitational push from the sewer. So there are some issues. And then in addition, our ordinances require that if we do have a cul-de-sac, that it meets certain specifications. So we're going to have to create these cul-de-sacs that are going to take more property, more ground from the property owner. So yes, we can do it. We don't think it's ideal. It's going to cost the property owner more of his square footage and more money on his part because he'll have to duplicate some of these services.
So the property owner said he wants to do it.
He has expressed an interest in doing it. It doesn't make a lot of practical sense to us, but
still in the planning stage.
There's been a half a dozen other neighbors who
we've all got the same thing. Probably not. We've all got.
I mean, we're talking about a street that is about 20 homes.
Yeah, and I think we should know when both Canyon Streets were installed, all the concept plan that showed the road.
Yeah, so back in 1985, there was an agreement reached that they would connect the road. But then the property owner died, sold the property to somebody else, and that property owner is now wanting to do something. Thank you.
Others already need it. Excuse me. The next meeting.
Test. We would like to call this meeting to order and welcome all of you here tonight. We appreciate you coming. We'll start out with an invocation by Jim LeRae, Debbie's husband, and a pledge of allegiance by Blaine Blad. And he's related. Okay, your dad. Okay. All right, thank you.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for the blessings that are ours and the chance we have to live here in this wonderful state and city of Utah, of Orem, for the freedoms that we enjoy and the opportunities we have to have the prosperity and the camaraderie and the feeling of family here. Father, we ask for thy spirit and guidance to be with the council this evening. We hear and listen to those ideas and items in the agenda that we can be inspired to know what's best for the city and for the people, and that we can make good decisions. And we pray for these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Now we'll please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Thank you. We've got some, item 7, we've got some personal appearances. And just to read how this works, time has been set aside for the public to express their ideas, concerns, and comments on items not scheduled as public hearings on the agenda. Those wishing to speak are encouraged to show respect for those who serve the city. Comments should focus on issues concerning the city. Those wishing to speak should have signed in before the beginning of the meeting. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. We'll start out with John Barrick. And if you just announce what city you live in. You don't have to put your actual address.
Hello, my name's John Barrick. I live in the city of Orem. I'm grateful for the city council to take up the Orem feasibility study with the Alpine School District. I'd like to talk for a minute about property taxes within the Alpine School District that Orem residents pay. I've got some slides. Hopefully they'll be able to get them up. If not, that's all right. I've handed them out to the city council. This is an example from page 169 of the current year, budget. They keep the property values constant at $370,000. And they show you at the bottom of the slide in yellow, small property increases or decreases in tax. They actually show that over a 5-year period, that taxes went down $77 over that period. Now, the second slide shows the actual impact on an Orem taxpayer. All I did is took Zillow and took the average Orem home over that period. 291,000 in 2018, 322, 336, 337, and 494 at the beginning of 2022. Our property values have gone up, as you know, and did the same math that the Alpine School District did in their example. And this shows a property tax change in the first year of $50, 57 in the second, 143 in the third, and $290 in the current year, which is a 24.7% tax increase. Now, how does this work? It's a little bit of sleight of hand. Notice the consistent tax increases. This is the reason the Utah State Legislature passed a law called Truth in Taxation, or TNT, is to blow up the kind of shenanigans the Alpine School District is playing in their budget. This shows that property taxes have gone up 33.6% in the last 4 years. Okay? That's a very large increase. Now, what else? The next slide, please. The next slide, well, on the last slide, it does show that the bond will raise taxes another $105. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The next slide shows the average property taxes paid over the last 20 years as a percentage by the residents of Orem, 28.2%. That is $570 million in property taxes just since 2009. Now, why do I mention 2009? Because in 2006, the Orem City Council took up a feasibility study and elected on a 3-4 vote not to put it on the ballot, and we would have split about 2009. Since then, Orem residents have paid $570 million in property taxes. Now, all of those property taxes would not have gone to build schools because 55% of those property taxes go to the general fund, but they would allow us to pay teachers more in an Orem school district. They would also allow us to decrease class sizes. Alpine School District on their budget on page 185 shows that they are raising class sizes by 4 in 4th, 5th, and 6th grades to 31. And it says next to that, actual class sizes may be higher because they count all teachers, not just teachers who are teaching in their calculations. And as you know, in Northridge Elementary, between 3rd and 7th, 6th grade, they're going to have 33 to 37 per class, which is unacceptable. Thank you for the courage to take the feasibility study, and we're looking forward to seeing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we've got Ben Wheeler.
Yes, good evening. In keeping with what John's saying, you'll notice from the taxes that Eagle Mountain is the only city that is actually has a windfall. Every other city, specifically Lehigh and Orem, are definitely paying more in taxes than they're receiving back in services. I will say to you that there is an online group called Stronger Together, and they are being very active in regards to talking about teacher benefits, teacher pay, and special education will not be better in an Orem school district. And I challenge them to think that the people in this building will do a much better job than what's happening today in the Alpine School District. They're publishing this information on the internet. Joe Johnson, who spoke to you last week, is the resident of Lehigh. He was even told by the leadership from Alpine School District and the stay together that if you wanted grandma requests, he didn't need to request them the normal way. And we had a talk about that said, if you take that, that's bribery. So we're very proud of what you're doing as a city council, that you're standing up for what we believe in, which is control of our own school and our own destiny. We don't want to build schools in Saratoga Springs. We don't want to build schools in Vineyard. We don't want to build schools in Linden. Really, I have about 1 minute and 35 seconds left. I also want to thank the Orem City Council and the Orem Library for standing up this year and taking the opportunity to move the Pride exhibit out of the children's section and put it into the adult section. I visited it just before I came in the building to see how it was presented, and it's as you walk in. And I thought, well, I'm going to be open-minded and try and understand what this means and how it affects us. If you walk out the door, you turn right, the first thing you see is the exhibit, and this is the book that you can see first. And if you can speak Spanish, you'd be disgusted. That was the biggest book facing the doorway as we walk out of the chamber. Thank you for standing up for who we are and what we represent as gatekeepers in Zion.
Thank you. Next, I've got, and it's hard to read this writing, but Cade Kidd, is that right? Okay.
You got it. Okay, I'm going to invite my neighborhood friends and family to stand just so you can see who's here that we're representing today. And I'm also going to read to keep this simple. Good evening, Mayor Young and City Council members. First off, thank you for this opportunity to come before you today. In respect of your time, we have consolidated our thoughts to present to you today. I stand with my friends and neighbors here this evening because we found out this week that a home in our neighborhood has been purchased by Heritage Behavioral Health Incorporated. We were all surprised to find out that this is a business that has purchased other homes and uses them as transitional homes. We were not even aware that this was something that could take place. I'm sure you can understand the surprise and worry that has followed since finding this out. We are concerned with the unknown of who the tenants are that would be allowed to reside in the home. We are parents and grandparents of children in this neighborhood, many of which live in very close proximity to the home in question. We are concerned for the safety of our neighborhood. what this might do to the value of the homes in close proximity and how it would adversely affect the ability to sell a home should a homeowner decide to. We recognize that facilities are necessary to treat those that are in need and support that effort, but struggle to see why it should be done in a residential area. We are aware that federal law permits the use of this home as a group home. However, we would like to understand the permit process. Our hope tonight is to come before you to raise our concerns and let you know that we would like to work with you, our city council, in an effort to find out more information on the intended use of this home and the impacts that will have on this community. If you could direct us to whom we could work with to research this, we would be grateful. It is our goal to research this further and return to the next council meeting in hopes of sharing what we find. We stand here before you as community members whose goal it is to maintain safe neighborhoods that provide the best possible environment for our community. We will be vigilant in making sure that all guidelines, laws, and purposes are met by contacting the city with any grievances. We ask that we be informed if the business license and permit issued by the city is used for any purpose other than what it was originally approved for, or if there is a request by Heritage for modifications. Most, if not all of you, included in your election campaigns the need to preserve Orem's neighborhoods. It is our hope that you will do all you can to help us preserve our neighborhood in this current troubling situation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kate. Yes, what we need to do is have you meet with Jamie and possibly myself.
Yeah, I think, Mayor, if I may, obviously our Development Services Department and our legal department can speak to specifics associated, one, with the application, and two, with the legal aspects or issues. We're happy to set up a time to sit down and have a conversation and involve you in that conversation and explain what we have to this date, to this point. But if you have their information, and so
you've got our contact. That's what
we will for sure then reach out to you.
Wonderful. Okay, appreciate it.
As we'll just reach out to you as the representative, and if you would be so kind as to reach out to your neighbors.
Thank you.
Actually, I spoke with Ryan about that today, so I think he's got a head start on this. So.
No,
I'm happy to include you in whatever way you'd like to be included.
Sure, I'm happy to try and help. It is a very difficult situation in that it's basically federal law over Orem laws. But anyway, we can talk to you and let you know what the options are and what the best things are to do. Next, I've got Jill Barrick.
Hi, I'm Jill Barrick, and we live in the Northridge Elementary School boundaries. I'm here tonight to speak about the buffet of educational offerings available at Northridge Elementary. Let's start with a large portion of child endangerment. That's right, Northridge offers your children the opportunity to be exposed to unbelievably loud noise, namely that of jackhammering in the brick corridors right next to the 6th grade and kindergarten rooms during school hours. The aroma was so strong and loud, it could be savored throughout the entire school and even in the parking lot outside. Yum. It was a delightful blend of flying debris, exorbitantly jarring noise, no perimeter barriers to prevent injury, with children wrapping coats around their heads to muffle the noise. A delicious side order of holding your potty all day was served as a side dish. Yes, OSHA violations of having the water turned off all day was served up hot and fresh in February. As another side dish included with your order of child endangerment, the robust refusal of ASD administrators to send a team of nurses to check the children's hearing afterwards. We asked, they declined. For those who enjoy a visual display whilst dining, Northridge offered not one but 2 incidents of naked children, both of which were withheld from the public's knowledge. Shh, it's the chef's secret. The tangy entree of terrible test scores is also available on the menu. Where Northridge once ranked 46th in the state in 2011, by 2017, they took a sharp nosedive to 335th. Superb. For those who prefer their smorgasbord with a more minimalist approach, Northridge offers just one specialty part-time PE. That's right, for those with a plate devoid of flavor for music, art, STEM, dance, drama, or any other creative pairing, rest assured Northridge is at the ready to meet your minimalist needs. As a final and classic amuse-bouche to top off the buffet, Northridge is now offering heaping portions of class sizes in the mid-30s for this fall's exclusive menu. Bon appetit, parents. Alpine School District owns this mess. A local school district would mean accountability, which ASD is refusing to give us parents and students. Thank you for commissioning a feasibility study. This gives us parents hope that we can be heard and our money can stay local. Thank you.
Next, we've got Sissy Rasmussen.
Hi, my name is Sissy Rasmussen. I have been an Orem resident for almost 20 years. My kids have been going to our public schools for 17 years, and we will be in them for the next 10 years. So you can imagine I'm very invested in the future of our schools, and I'm experienced in the past realities of our Orem schools. I'm here to extend an invitation to the City Council and to the Orem residents to a Facebook group that friends and I started recently. We've been meeting for some months and trying to understand the feasibility study information, trying to spread awareness about this issue. Our group is called Stronger Together. You can find us on Facebook. It's a body of parents and other interested members of the Orem community committed to a thoughtful and honest appraisal of an Orem-only school district. We believe that Orem schools, students, teachers, and residents are best served by staying with Alpine School District. And in the 3 weeks that we've been formed on Facebook, we have almost 800 members, many of which are school employees. And the overwhelming feeling is that these people who are part of our group are in favor of staying with Alpine School District, which mimics what I've seen in PTA meetings and school community council meetings throughout Orem, where the vast majority support staying in Alpine School District. And I know some of you disagree with that assessment, but I've been in those meetings and even seen a vote taken, and the overwhelming majority of the people in PTA and school community council meetings do not support an Orem school district. I think you would be very interested to be in our group. I know a couple of you already are and have even engaged with some of the commenters in our group on Facebook, and I really appreciate that. I think what you'll see is that teachers have serious concerns, and I think what you see is parents have serious concerns, and these are your constituents, and I hope you'll take a moment. If you don't want to engage on it, I understand that. Facebook is tricky, but I hope you'll come and read their comments. As far as information that we present, like Mr. Barrick presented the property taxes, we cover that, plus the other sources of income which make up the vast majority of the budget for Orem schools. And we have based that on data that is publicly available through Alpine School District, which is the same data that Orem City Grammar requested from Alpine School District, and which will be used in the feasibility study. So I just wanted to come here and invite you all to be a part of that, to hear your constituents in that way. Thank you.
Heidi Clark.
Hi, I'm Heidi. I have lived in Orem for nearly 20 years now. One of the things I've always valued about the community is that the police department has always seemed invested in keeping our community safe and informed. They use social media to keep the community informed of things that be of particular interest, and they take measures like crosswalk stings to keep us safe. Which is why I was surprised and saddened by the radio silence after an Orem police officer hit a pedestrian who was in the crosswalk, crossing with the signal, at 11:29 on the morning of June 16th. The officer was making a left turn onto Center Street from Garden Park. This is the intersection at the Wendy's and post office in front of Target. The intersection had its protected left turns removed a few years ago. The officer was the lead car at the traffic light, followed by a white Tesla, followed by me. I could clearly see the older woman waiting to cross as I waited for the light. I remember wondering if I'd have to wait for an extra cycle. The light turned green, the woman got the signal that it was safe to cross. After all of the pedestrian stings covering exactly this issue, the officer just went when the light turned green. The woman was in the second lane when she was hit. It's been crickets from the Orem Police Department. They haven't so much as acknowledged it happened, let alone reported on the status of the victim, or asked for patience while Linden investigates. I'd like our city's police force to be more transparent in this. Not acknowledging this erodes trust, and trust for law enforcement has been eroded enough nationwide without incidents like this. I'd also like the city to reconsider the protected left turns at that intersection that will protect pedestrians by not signaling them to cross Center Street while people are turning left. And drivers also don't tend to have a lot of patience for people going straight through that intersection on Garden Park, which leads to a not insignificant amount of close calls. People attempt to turn left into people who are going straight through the intersection. Thank you.
Thank you. Got Shauna Meekum.
Thanks, Shauna Meekum from Orem. And just to Heidi's point, it's always been kind of interesting to me that we kind of clamor for a system where we have to drive everywhere when that's the most dangerous thing any of us does any day. I mean, when else in your day are you operating a killing machine? I don't think the police officer intended to, and it would be great if we didn't have to drive for everything. About 6 months ago, you created the Director of Legislative Counsel on a kind of trial basis. I believe that term is up soon. By nature of the position, this attorney isn't in direct contact with staff nor citizens, and I believe that's led to some poor advice in 3 instances. First, the State Street Master Plan. Good advice would have been, people have concerns, let's peg down exactly what they're worried about and see if we can work together to alter that. What you chose to do instead was remove the plan entirely, which has led to some consternation in your partner agencies, with staff, with anyone who was involved in the 5 years and $500,000 it took to create that plan. Second, Planning Commission, and this is a little personal, but you were worried the Planning Commission might somehow thwart that State Street Master Plan change. Good advice would have been, we don't see any evidence that Planning Commission is going to do that. If they do something wrong, request their removal, but you don't have to take their advice anyway. What you chose to do instead was remove power from the city manager and switch out of those vocal supporters, those who had any support for State Street Master Plan, with those who thought the way you did, which has kind of eroded trust between your past, present, and potential citizen volunteers, that they won't be similarly dismissed if they disagree with you. Thirdly, Alpine School District, good advice. Yeah, the district does look big. Let's get together with Alpine. Let's have some public meetings, get everyone answering questions together. Perhaps we can even do a joint study and get a target date so our citizens are working toward a date to split from Alpine. Instead, you chose to go it alone, which has led to some awkward grandma requests that I think could have been avoided if you were working more closely together. And I could be wrong, but if the Director of Legislative Counsel has moved you down roads that have created unnecessary discord, it's not too late to seek better advice, and it's not too late to rebuild some of that trust. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 8, which is consent items. There's item 8.1, a resolution to authorize the City of Orem's participation in the Utah Valley Home Consortium. Item number 8.2, a motion, Mayor Pro Tem, July through December 2022. The mayor and the city council will appoint Councilmember Lene Millett as Mayor Pro Tem to serve from July through December of 2022. And item 8.3, a resolution to have Orem contribute to the Utah State Retirement Contribution Amendment.
Move that we approve the consent items, Mayor.
Second. Do we have a second?
Second.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We've got item number 9. We've got an ordinance amending chapter 23 of the Orem City Code for stormwater utility. We'll have Reed Price come up and do a presentation on that. Yes,
So,
Councilman
Mayor,
Millett would like to say something.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm not out of order here, but I would like to make one comment regarding some of the comments that were made during the public comment period. I would just like to encourage all members of our community, when they engage online on these Facebook pages that people are creating, if the administrators of those Facebook pages could encourage civil discourse, I think that would go a long way to help us to have a factual, data-driven, non-emotional approach to what we're doing with this school district study. I've seen some very vicious and attack language from some people. I notified the administrators, and I would hope that they would follow through and delete those comments, and then encourage the participants to have civil discourse. You know, sometimes people forget who they are on social media, so let's encourage them to be kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Reed, are you all set to go?
I think so. I'm just. Mayor and City Council, it's a pleasure to be in front of you again. We discussed this in greater detail during the work session a couple of weeks ago. It's my purpose to come in front of you to review what we discussed as staff is recommending that we amend Chapter 23 of the of City Code, which addresses the stormwater utility. We are going through this update as kind of a house cleaning effort. We wanted to make sure that we clarified some language that was in the code, addressed some deficiencies, and also to make sure that we were in compliance with new regulations that have come out from the Division of Water Quality. Some of the basic changes I mentioned, primarily housekeeping. We've clarified some of the definitions. We've fixed some basic grammatical errors. We've added and updated hyperlinks in the document. We've removed references to gender as it applies to titles. We have changed employee titles to match what their current titles are. We reformatted some areas to consolidate space, and we've deleted some sections that we felt were unnecessarily repetitive. Those were primarily the basic changes. There were some that were a little more significant, however, not earth-shattering by any means. This included a recommendation by staff to include a new $1,000 bond when a development occurs to ensure that property owners continue to comply with the stormwater regulations after construction is completed and before landscaping is installed. There's also some requirements that were added to the section on long-term stormwater management. Those requirements would require developer to complete a specific questionnaire related to long-term stormwater management during the planning process, which helps us as we review plans. We are also asking that developers would provide a map as part of the final approval that show exact locations where site improvements were made, so that when we go back to ensure that these structures continue to function in the future, that we know exactly where to go. Finally, a retrofit plan was added to the code. This retrofit plan would require redeveloped properties that are larger than an acre, as well as established properties that we know are adversely impacting stormwater quality to come into compliance with measures to manage and protect stormwater. That's a quick summary of what we discussed in greater detail at the work session last time. It's staff's recommendation that the code be changed and updated with these recommendations.
Thank you, Reed. Do we have any questions from anyone? We discussed this at length in our work session. So are we good to vote? Would someone like to make a resolution?
I move that by ordinance we amend Chapter 23 of the Orem City Code for storm water utility.
I'll second that.
Tom?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
The ordinance passes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Reed. Next, we're going to have a presentation from Brandon Nielsen on amending our recent budget. So I misspoke. This is our prior year budget, right?
This
our
is,
current
well,
budget.
Yeah, technically still our current year budget for two more whole days. So thank you, Mayor, for allowing us to come forth with these budget amendments here at the end of the fiscal year. As you know, and as we've discussed in prior meetings, we have various changes that occur during the year, primarily related to grants in most cases, and this time is no exception. To begin with, all the items you see with a note of 1 as you look through there, all of those items are related to a grant or donation in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, up in the right-hand corner, I've highlighted the biggest item related to those grants, and that happens to be the second tranche of the ARPA money that we received, which is there are only 2. So we received one at about the same time last year. This is the second half. The first one was that exact same amount. The primary use, obviously, of these funds the intent of those use of these funds is in large part to Hillcrest Park. So just to give you make you aware that those monies have come in, and obviously this budget accounts for those funds coming in. And then obviously we will be spending those monies as we go. The second item of major importance with these amendments is item number 2, the 2 items in blue. You can see there are 2 of them for a little over 5.7 million. When we complete our fiscal 21 actual financials, there is a requirement in state law that we have a maximum amount of fund balance, what's termed unassigned fund balance, that we can keep within our general fund. We are allowed a time frame by which to transfer those funds out of the general fund. And the reason you see 2 entries here, obviously, is one is removing it from the general fund, and the other item is bringing it into our capital projects fund for use for whatever capital projects we may have need of within that. Normally, those are parks related, street related, sometimes equipment related, and most recently, probably city center related. And so that is the amount that is portion of that is required to fall underneath that state required ceiling, that 35%. Another portion of it is related to, and that's approximately 2.2 million. The other portion of that is the city has followed a general guideline of, well, there's not necessarily a reason to leave that money sitting unused within the general fund, because it could always be brought back into the general fund if needed. So we take the other portion of that money to get down to, and it's approximately 15%, not taking into account items that are already encumbered. Encumbered means we've created a purchase order to buy something and we just haven't received it yet, or haven't paid for it yet. So it takes those pieces and doesn't take them into account. So between the 2.2 million to get us down to the ceiling and 3.5 million to bring us down to approximately that 15%, it comes to that's $5.725 million. And the last item, which is somewhat of an unusual nature, is this item at the near the bottom in orange, item number 3. We received a Volkswagen grant to replace certain vehicles that were not based on VW getting sued because they were, cheating on their mileage, how much they said the mileage that their vehicles were getting. The state received that money and then granted that money out to anybody who applied. City applied for funds and received based on certain vehicles. One of those vehicles that we applied for was the senior citizen bus. Through various things that have occurred since then, the approval of that original bus, mainly not being able to find that bus. And because of COVID, several operators no longer make buses. As you can imagine, the world during COVID kind of changed that whole transportation world upside down. And so several of the bus manufacturers actually went out of business. So we were left to figure out how to find another bus to replace the aging bus that we currently have. We did eventually find a bus that was already available. And unfortunately, that bus was a little bit bigger and cost a little more costly than the amount we were getting from the VW grant. The state did allow us to, in essence, transfer to the grant award money to this new bus, but we had to come up with approximately $45,000 more to pay for the bus. The Senior Citizens Fund has a rather decent sized surplus, and that was agreed that they would split that $45,000 between, in essence, general fund operations and the Senior Citizen Fund to pay for that additional cost. So those are the big items in relation to these budget amendments. Any questions about any of those particular items or anything else on there that you see that I have not specifically discussed?
Just to clarify, so that 5.7 million is essentially coming out of the general fund.
Correct.
And it's being moved to the capital improvements project fund. Correct. And based on all the criteria that you had to meet to get it there. And then as far as the capital improvements project fund, is that likely earmarked for the city center, or is that something else, or is it earmarked to anything?
It is not earmarked for anything in particular. We have, through our budget process, identified certain elements that certain things that we intend to use approximately just short of $900,000 of that for, and they're in the same arenas as we have set aside funds that we've set aside each year related to roofs, various facilities, whether that be HVAC type things. So there's certain elements in relation to those that we're in essence saving up for over time. There are other elements related to some recreational components that such as the line machine. I think it's called a turf tank, if I remember correctly. Some things in that area to help our parks crews in relation in the recreation area. So some of those items have been identified up to 900,000. The remaining amount, approximately 4.8 million, that is left to be determined where that need. Obviously, given certain pricing that we currently have related to potentially the city center, there may be a need for those funds in relation to that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, would someone like to make a motion? Oh,
Public hearing?
actually, we have to have a public hearing. I got it. Okay, we're going to open a public hearing for anyone that would like to say anything or comment about this. Okay, we'll close the public hearing if no one wants to speak. And now we'll move to a vote.
I'll make the motion. I make a motion that we amend the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget as so described.
Second. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
The ordinance passes. Thank you, Brandon. All right, lastly, we've got, you're good, okay. We've already gone over some of the city manager's information items. And then we've got item number 11. This is a communication item, monthly financial summary for review only.
That's just included in your packet for your review when you get it.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. We're going to adjourn to a closed meeting. This meeting will be held in the conference room, number 107, Orem City Hall, 56 North State Street, in Orem, Utah. And this will be a closed meeting to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual pursuant to code section 52-4-205 1A.
I'll second it.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
We will adjourn. Thank you.